Monster Synthesis Master. Chapter 411 Monster Security Company. In terms of understanding of wild animals, Dragon City was definitely second to none, and Fae was not to be outdone either. Among the three great alliances of the Freedom Federation, only Sand City had the least understanding of wild animals. The Dragon City had to fight against the Beast Tide in the north every year. There was a small Beast Tide every year, and a big Beast Tide every 5 years. One Beast Tide had to fight against millions of wild beasts, and they had seen countless types of wild beasts. In order to deal with these wild beasts, they had to understand their habits and characteristics. Therefore, Dragon City's research on wild beasts had a deep foundation in historical factors. The reason that Faye understood was similar. The invasion of the Dark Forest had brought many rotten beasts. In order to deal with these beasts, various data records and experimental tests had been done, and they had a lot of animal information on hand. However, neither Dragon City nor Fairy's high-ranking officials had any impression of the giant wolf in the video. As Su Tianzhao's master and one of the most powerful people in the entire Dragon City, Leng Guan had seen a lot. At this moment, he said in a low voice, judging from its body shape, the appearance revealed under the armor, and its attack form and method, it's very likely to be a wasteland wolf. The other officials of Dragon City muttered, but I've never seen a wasteland wolf of this size before. Even the wild wolves that had been enhanced by the beast jade didn't have such a body size. This Kazaya is too exaggerated. What's even more exaggerated is that there are 300 such wild wolves in Shandu. Our Dragon City also has cavalry troops, but compared to these 300 wolf cavalry troops, they are like paper. Su Tianzhao's expression was grave. It had only been a few days since the defeat in Shandu, and in the blink of an eye, there were already 300 strong wolf cavalry soldiers. According to the information gathered by the spies in Dragon City, Fernandez and the Mun Kingdom didn't have such abilities. Link, on the other hand, had made a name for himself in the slums. He was also an elder of the Moon Shadow Council and was quite good at taming beasts. This was definitely a trump card that Link had prepared beforehand. Su Tianzhao quickly came up with an evaluation that this person should not be underestimated. In the video, the armed jeeps in the desert soon turned into columns of black smoke, and the rest of them were fleeing madly in the direction of the Goria Grand Canal. This was a great victory. Link spread his hands and said calmly, as you can see, the Sand City still has the ability to protect its home. I would like to thank the two heads of state for your help. However, I think it's better for you two to keep your mecha clans for other purposes. Link looked at Su Tianzhao, the Dragon City Lord, and suddenly said, if I remember correctly, in 3 months, Dragon City will be facing a great beast tide that occurs once every 5 years. As long as City Lord Su says the word, the Sand City will send troops to help at any time. It's our duty to do so. Link then turned to Augustine, the head of the Magic Knight Council. Every year, Fae is deeply damaged by the gloomy forest. It's only a few months before spring. If Fae needs help, please feel free to ask, head of state. Before the three-way summit, Su Tianzhao and Augustine had already made plans to send troops to Shandu. They had even discussed with the officials about the amount of military expenses and the land they would be given. However, they didn't expect Link to suddenly do this during the meeting. The power of the 300 wolf riders had stunned the leaders and high-level officials of Dragon City and the Magic Knight. After watching the video, Link even returned the number of punches he had received from the two of them at the start of the battle. He repeated it to them in the same tone and with the same care. The 3 commanders of Shandu, who had been sitting on pins and needles, were no longer feeling suffocated and their breathing was smooth. With just 300 wolf cavalry soldiers, they had fought such a beautiful battle on the front line. The armed jeep's mobility that could not be restricted before was now vulnerable in front of the wilderness wolf cavalry. Whether it was instant acceleration or flexible movement, the armed jeep carrying 5 people was no match for the flexible wild wolf. In front of the wasteland wolf, which was covered in alloy plates, the jeep was just a bigger toy. Just as Dragon City and Fei's higher UPS were shocked by the power of the 300 wolf riders, Link gave them another heavy blow. Link's lips curled into an official smile. There are a total of 100,000 wild wolves in Shandu now. 50,000 of them have been sold to the outlanders and the upper-class nobles in Shandu, and there are 50,000 left. If the two of you have any needs, you're welcome to have business exchanges and visits. Buzz. On the other end of the video, Dragon City and Fei's officials were dumbfounded. 300 wolves were enough to wipe out the armed vehicles of the Machinery Faith and the Wasteland Gang. What was the concept of 100,000 wolves? What was even scarier was that Link said that he would sell the 50,000 to the Inhumans and upper-class people in the Shadow. This was a sign that he wanted to turn the entire population into soldiers. There were also mutants in Dragon City and Fayette, and there were quite a number of them. From their interactions with the Inhumans, they knew that they were a group of people who loved to stir up trouble. If they obtained such a terrifying creature, wouldn't they become stronger and cause more trouble? Su Tianzhao laughed and declined Link's offer. There's no need for that. We already have a headache dealing with the beast tide in the north. If these wild wolves appear in the city, I'm afraid it will be even more troublesome. In the video, Augustine had a faint smile on his face. Thank you for your kind intentions, General Lin. Our Fei doesn't have a suitable army type, so we don't need the wasteland wolves. Augustine paused for a moment and looked at the time. Since Sandu has proven that it has the ability to fight against the Machinery Faith and the Wasteland Gang, then Fei will not send any reinforcements. I also hope that the hidden danger in Shandu can be resolved as soon as possible and the stability of the southwest of the Freedom Federation can be maintained. Augustus and the officials of Fei raised their hands together and made a goodbye sign on their chests, which was unique to the familiars. The video signal was cut off, and the familiars went offline. Su Tianzhao also gave Link a meaningful nod and went offline. Only Link and the three commanders were left in the video conference. The three commanders were no longer dejected like they had been in the past few days. They were all in high spirits and their eyes were bright. They had thought that they would extort a large sum of military funds from the Shito Kingdom and even cede a piece of land to them. They didn't expect Link to be prepared. The 300 wolf riders easily broke the mobile armed jeep of the Desert Coalition army, which was impossible to defeat, and gave the other two guilds a hard slap in the face. General, I didn't expect you to have arranged everything so early, Commander David said. He was now full of admiration for Link. The mobility of the Desert Alliance army, which had made him want to kill himself, was easily neutralized by Link. He'd thought that Link was just trying to stop him. He didn't think that it would be so easy. Link just smiled faintly, without any arrogance on his face. We didn't win all of them. The wolf riders we sent out today did suffer some losses, and they weren't as strong as you think. If they were to face a carpet bombing or a high-energy weapon, these wolf riders would only be sending themselves to their deaths. Their role was limited to tangling with the enemy's mobility troops. If we want to completely solve the desert's hidden danger, we can't just rely on the wolf cavalry. Link entered swarm commander mode and noticed that 5 giant wolves on the battlefield had lost their signals. He didn't know the exact number of enemies killed, but compared to the losses, Link's heart ached more for the 5 wolves. In addition, a few giant wolves were also injured by bullets. After all, the armor on the body was not an all-round protection, and the enemy's bullets also had powerful armor-piercing bullets. The alloy armor could not completely block the damage. However, the one-stop logistics support center had been completed, and they only needed to wait for the giant wasteland wolf to return before they could receive treatment. At this moment, Benjamin hurriedly ran into the military's conference room, and through the video camera, he said in a slightly panicked tone, "General, the commerce departments of Dragon City and Far Night have called. They want to discuss the introduction of the wild wolves." Commander Dai, who was in charge of the case in the military region's conference room, jumped up from his chair. "What did you just say? Both Dragon City and Faya want to buy the wasteland wolf?" Commander Fernandez and Commander Mun exchanged a look and smiled. They really were two old foxes. During the summit, they were all very confident, saying the most ruthless words and being the most arrogant people. However, as soon as the video conference ended, he immediately arranged for the relevant departments to contact Shadow without delay. It highlighted the truth. The three commanders, including Benjamin, were all watching the video, waiting for the highest leader of Howling Heights, Link, to give his orders. Dai Yi, I'll leave this matter to you. I only have one request, and that is to delay it as much as possible. Dion's expression changed slightly. His brows furrowed, not understanding what Link meant. They had talked about selling to the outside world in the video conference, but what was the point of dragging it out? Dragon City and Fae should have quite a few intelligence personnel in the Sand Capital, Link said slowly. I looked through Tico's database, but I didn't find any relevant information. Although I understand that Commander Dai believes that the Freedom Federation shares the same breath and fate, we should also have full control over the intelligence system of our allies in Shandu. I know what to do. Dai Yi immediately saluted sternly. After all, Dai Yi had a background in intelligence, so he immediately understood the entire process of the matter. On one hand, they would delay the people from Dragon City and Far Night. At this time, the intelligence personnel from both sides would disguise themselves as ordinary people and buy wild wolves from Shenmue City. They would then smuggle them back to their respective territories. As long as he could grasp the wild wolf's direction and smuggling route, he could follow the clues and find the intelligence agency set up by Dragon City and Farianan in Shandu. Link nodded. It was easy to talk to smart people. At the same time, a main city mission appeared in Link's system. Main City Mission Shadow, Underground Alliance Intelligence Organization. Mission hint: Dragon City and Fae have set up intelligence organizations in Shandu, and they are out of your sight. Without alerting the enemy, dig them out through the Wasteland Wolf trade and include them in the Special Intelligence Department's monitoring system. Mission reward: 150000 experience points and the activation of the excellent event Forsaking the Dark for the Light. Another main city mission had been obtained. In his previous life, Link had only been a gold farming worker. He had not become the leader of any faction, so he had never experienced a main city mission. However, now that he had become the leader of the Sand City, he had received 3 main city missions in a row. Combined with the information he had read on the forum in his previous life, Link had a general idea of the rewards for the main city missions. The main city quests' direct rewards were not high, and most of them were experience. However, every main city quest would trigger a chain event after it was completed. After completing the chain story event, a portion of the additional rewards would be given, and this portion of the rewards was the most crucial. Furthermore, the choice of each chain event would affect the attitude of an individual or a force towards you, as well as the direction of the plot. For example, Wind Chaser, who was well known in his previous life, had become the leader elected by all the slaves after leading the slaves on Sly Wind to complete the uprising. He had received the title of Slave Liberator and won the favor of the middle and lower level NPCs in the entire Fandi system, where the planet was located. This allowed the Miracle Guild to travel smoothly in the entire star system and establish its foundation. Link had just finished assigning tasks to Dai Yi when the macaw appeared at the entrance of the meeting room. Its 2 wings were stuck to its side and it was swaying left and right on the spot. The way it walked looked like a roly-poly, but also like a silly parrot. However, Link still understood that the bird was pretending to be a penguin. He then realized that it was the penguin, Penny, who had come to the castle. Why is Penny here in the middle of the day? Can't you just talk over the phone? Link found it hard to believe. He then said to the channel, if there's nothing else, then everyone can leave. On the other end of the video conference, the 3 commanders and Benjamin all stood up and saluted, waiting for Link to leave the video conference. Link walked out of the meeting room and asked in confusion, why did Penny come over personally? Is there something? The macaw nodded mysteriously. Something big has happened. Not only Penny, Fu, Xingziu, Mr. Kong, and the bandit Liang are all here, the entire think tank is here. Link stood in the corridor, thinking for a moment. All the large-scale projects were in progress, and they were going smoothly. The situation with the Desert Coalition Army had also been temporarily alleviated, and there were no major events happening in the Sand City. He really couldn't think of anything that would make the entire think tank come to Windhowl Castle to talk. The macaw flapped its wings and whispered, "Come closer, I'll tell you why they're here." Link bent over and heard the macaw speak in a strained voice. "Penny said she can only tell you when she sees you, so I don't know, ha ha ha." Before he could finish his sentence, the macaw fled like a bolt of lightning, and the entire second-floor corridor was filled with its annoying laughter. Childish! Link was speechless as he walked towards the guest room where the think tank was. The moment Link arrived, the people drinking tea in the living room immediately stood up. "Boss! Boss!" Link gestured for everyone to take their seats. "What wind blew you all here today? I've been thinking about it for a long time, but I can't think of anything that's worth such a big fuss." Everyone in the think tank looked at the director Penny. Penny jumped down from the sofa and said with an extremely serious expression, "Boss, I want to change the current company structure model. I want to expand the original security company and turn it into a monster security company. P.S. The monthly votes ranking is slowly dropping. I hope everyone can cheer for Wanjun." Chapter 412. Our goal is to take over Wasteland Planet. Monster Security Company? This name was quite novel. "Please continue." Link sat on the sofa, listening to Penny's explanation of his new suggestion with interest. Penny handed a document to Link. "This is the sales of the wolf in the past few days, as well as the sales of the pet hamster and the 3 treasures of security. I noticed that pet rental and sales have great potential in Shadow. Especially after getting the idea of the boss's wolf rental per year, I feel that this matter can be expanded and has great potential. First of all, judging from the purchasing trend and willingness of the wild wolves, both the Shadow Aboriginals and the Inhumans have a large demand for wild wolves. Even the high price could not stop people's enthusiasm. And I've analyzed the types and numbers of pets boss has now, and I found that there are many business opportunities to take on the rental task. This is the prerequisite. Secondly, the slums of Shadow are all under the boss's control now, and the security is stable. The established security companies were still divided according to the scope of the previous gangs, whether it was cooperation or communication. They were not as fast and effective as the centralized system. Moreover, there were a large number of Inhumans doing missions to help maintain law and order in the slums, so the overall atmosphere of the entire slum was gradually improving. This also means that the security company has not effectively utilized the efficiency of its personnel. Hearing the clear logic in the language of the penguin, Link couldn't help nodding. The original purpose of the slums was to reward the gang leaders who had conquered the world with him. However, he was now the supreme commander of Shandu, and the stability of the slums had been achieved with the help of the better environment and the efforts of the Inhumans. In terms of efficiency, it was indeed a problem. That's why I started thinking after seeing the whole of Shadow buying wild wolves. Why can't we combine pet rental and security company together? So I communicated with the other colleagues in think tank and finally came up with a stable and feasible idea: Monster Security Company. Link was very interested to hear how the Monster Security Company operated and its results. After the Monster Security Company is integrated, it will be divided into 2 parts. One part was pet rental, and the other part was the original business in the slums, and the 2 could complement each other. For example, the current wolf rental, one-stop logistics management, 3 treasures of security, and pet hamster could all be included in the scope of the Monster Security Company. For example, the Invisible Killer Bee, Black Widow, Illusion Vine, various Condors, Hellhounds, Obsidian Vanguard, and Hydraulic Press Hippopotamus can also accept some missions based on their own characteristics. Other than the staff who are responsible for the stability of the slums and the daily affairs of the security company, the other staff members can expand their business outside. As our monster security company's business scope expands, our vision will also expand. Boss, you're now the supreme commander of Shandu, and your vision must go beyond Shandu to even further places. Why don't we set a small goal first to start with the Freedom Federation? Link could tell what was going on. After analyzing what Penny said, he realized that it did make sense. There were more than 1,000 people in the slums. If they all stayed in the slums, it would be a waste of their future. The most important point was class solidification. In the past, there were still conflicts between gangs, and they could still raise their class by making contributions. However, now that Link had unified the Sand City, the slums were the place where Link first made his fortune and also the place he controlled the longest. Naturally, they were now the most obvious places to solidify. The newly joined fighters had no way of accumulating merits to be promoted. They could only maintain their positions at the bottom level and could not see any way to rise. After the integration of the Monster Security Company, there would be many new positions and new opportunities. Tell me in detail about this vision you mentioned. Link's interest was piqued. Since Penny could say this, it meant that he already had an idea. Penny gulped down a mouthful of water and continued, take this sale of wild wolves as an example. We've sold 50,000 wolves in Shandu, and there are still tens of thousands left. We can sell them to Dragon City and French Nightfall through foreign trade. Moreover, since there was foreign trade, he could arrange for some of the members of the security company to set up offices or branches in Dragon City and Fae to establish this trade line of the Freedom Federation. When the branch office reached a certain size, Tong Li could extend the rental and commission of the Monster Security Company to various places. Moreover, the Monster Security Companies in various places can also become the intelligence distribution center of Shandu and other places. Penny used Link's status as the supreme leader of Shandu to start using his monopoly advantage. He used the most powerful and unique pets in Shandu as a spear to open up the Dragon City and Magic Night markets. With this, he gained a firm foothold and diversified the functions of the security company branch in other places. Link's thoughts had already drifted far away after hearing Penny's plan. The Monster Security Company allowed their pets to take on missions outside. Not only could they train their abilities, but they could also expand their influence. It was killing two birds with one stone. Moreover, with the sales network built by him as the leader of the Sand City, he could repeat this process everywhere he went. In turn, the Monster Security Company would be established throughout the entire Freedom Federation, even outside. Whether it was the main mission on Wasteland Planet or the hidden main mission of Mandala's Revenge, Link had to be on the entire planet. Instead of fighting and annexing everywhere like a war maniac, it was better to use monopoly to radiate influence through business and trade. The other forces would either join or be restricted. Link couldn't help but give him a thumbs up. As expected of Penny. I was right to let you be the director of the Lin's financial group. Monster Security Company's proposal has passed. Penny straightened his back and suddenly felt that the red scarf on his neck was even more vibrant. Boss, you're too kind. The entire plan was the result of the collective efforts of the think tank. I'm only speaking on behalf of them. Link's eyes swept across Fu, Xingziu, Mr. Kong, and the bandit Liang one by one. His expression was extremely sincere. It's my good fortune to have a group of think tanks like you. Everyone was humble and said that it was a blessing to have an open-minded boss like Lin Ke. After that, they discussed the details of the Monster Security Company. Finally, Link said to Penny, by the way, at today's summit, I showed Dragon City and Fae the power of the Wasteland Wolf. Although both parties expressed their lack of interest in the video, after the meeting ended, Dragon City and French Knight's Commerce departments both called to ask about the purchase situation of the Wasteland Wolf. I plan to use the Wasteland Wolf to lure out the Dragon City and Fae's intelligence agencies in Shandu, so I ordered Commander Dai to delay it. After that, Pony will take over the company's reform and mergers, and this matter will also be taken care of. Penny extended her penguin wings and did an OK sign. Don't worry, boss. I'll make sure everything is arranged properly. At that moment, the macaw that had slipped away suddenly appeared again. It lay at the door and kept winking at Link. I think that even though Penny's plan is good, it's missing the most crucial part. Oh? Which ring? Penny couldn't help but ask. The others in the think tank also focused their attention on the macaw, wanting to hear what it had to say. The macaw chuckled, that means you can't communicate with your pets and you can't know their wishes. So, I have to join this monster security company. I want to be the manager of the pets and be responsible for the communication work. Everyone's eyes lit up when they heard this. They had really forgotten about this. The monster security company accepted all kinds of activities and missions. How could they not have someone who could communicate with their pets? The outline of monster security company became clearer and clearer in Lin Kei's mind. Communication was indeed the most important position in the new company. It seemed that he would have to synthesize more of such people in the future. Or maybe he could directly synthesize a creature that could be mass-produced for translation and communication and be used on a large scale. The macaw saw that Link was deep in thought. According to the Introduction to Psychology and Behavioral Psychology it had been studying for the past few days, it could tell that Link had clearly listened to what he had just said and was thinking about something. However, this expression made the macaw slightly flustered. It hurriedly said, "But don't worry, Link. I won't forget my job as a secretary." After experiencing the unemployment problem, the macaw had a deeper understanding of the phrase master skills and never lose your job. "It's not your fault," said Link, waving his hand. "I was just thinking about something else." "I'll leave the rest to you," Link said to Penny. "I'll leave it to you." It was the base camp of the Monster Security Company, set up in Shenmue City. In addition, the employed employees are mainly former members of the security company. When there are insufficient employees, we will recruit new ones. When recruiting, we must do background checks clearly. I have a feeling that this monster security company will become an important capital and department for us to dominate the entire wasteland. If I have to set a small goal, I think that as long as there is a colony on Wasteland Planet, there should be a monster security company. Our goal is to take over Wasteland Planet. Link's words were extremely provocative, and everyone was eager to give it a try. Their eyes seemed to be imagining the scene of the monster security company spreading all over the planet in the future. After Link's arrangements, the think tank retreated and immediately went back to study the system structure and action plan of Monster Security Company. After the meal, Lin Kei checked his attributes interface. He now had 5.2 million experience points in his experience pool. He was still 800,000 experience points away from the task wealth of knowledge. Link went to the mission board and counted the missions he had on hand. 1 C-rank mission, the prey targeted by the wasteland. This mission is a time mission, and the reward is based on the dynamic evaluation. It can't be completed in a short time. 2 S-rank mission, Heart of the Swarm. Link's current progress was 10%. If he wanted to get the next reward, he would need to complete his cheat code to 20%. It was difficult at the moment. 3 A-rank mission, Mandala's Revenge. Link had successfully killed 2 of them and met the other 2 in today's video conference. It would be difficult to make progress in the short term. 4 Profession mission, Learning Well. 5 NPC mission, I Am a Legend. It requires the killing of 5 commander-level NPCs no lower than level 50 and the creation of an S-level skill. It is also very difficult. 6 Main City mission, Sand City, Eliminate Jinxu. Eliminate the Machinery Faith and Wasteland Gang, reward random specialty, 1 million experience, and activate the epic event Heart of the Desert. This was the focus of Link's current stage, but it was also difficult to complete in a short time. 7 Main City mission, Shuta Gobi Oasis, build a home for the wild beasts in the Gobi. Reward, 200,000 experience points. Activated excellent event Wild Beast's Strange Movement. If there were any missions that could be completed in a short time, this mission was one of them. With the incentive of the wolf by installments, the players' funds were tight, and they were more willing to accept such constructive missions. The Gobi was changing every day. 8 Main City Mission Shadow, Underground Alliance Intelligence Organization, discovered Dragon City and Fey Intelligence Agency. Reward, 150,000 experience, activated excellent event Forsake Darkness for Light. Based on what Link knew about the Madman Dai Yi and the Penguin, Penny, the two intelligence organizations would probably appear in front of Link in a few days if the Tico and the think tank, who had the power to mobilize all the departments of the Lin Financial Group, worked together. At that time, this mission would be completed. In this way, Link could earn 350000 experience points from the mission Indiana a short time. Link rubbed his chin and muttered to himself, in this case, I'm still short of 450000 experience points. Where should I go to get some Kazaya? This was because Link's status had changed. If it was just the Lin Family Financial Group's chairman, it would be fine for Link to interact with the players outside. However, he was now the supreme leader of Shandu. It would be a waste of time for him to step down and fleece the players for 450,000 experience. Suddenly, Link's eyes brightened as he thought of two good things. He still had 2 instance dungeon crystals. One was the fall of the King of Sand City, and the other was the Moro's Tower. Link first looked at the description of the dungeon crystal, the fall of the King of Shudu. Instance dungeon name, the fall of the King of Sand. Suggested level, level 35 level 45. Instance dungeon mode, 40-man large-scale time-limited quest instance dungeon. Plot outline, you received an invitation from the King of Assassins, John, to assassinate Alongso, the Supreme Commander of Shadu. On the day of the operation, you successfully boarded the plane after encountering many obstacles. Now, you are going to face Alongso's elite troops and guards in this air prison. Instance dungeon objective, successfully kill the King of Shandu before the plane enters Dragon City territory. After reading this, Link rejected the option. Once the instance dungeon crystal was used, it would create an instance dungeon light screen door at a fixed location, which would act as the instance dungeon's permanent location. In order to maximize the effect, Link couldn't use the dungeon crystal in Howling Castle. Otherwise, the place where he lived would have players coming and going every day, making it like a vegetable market. Moreover, there was a problem with this mission. The plot outline clearly stated that John had participated in the assassination of Alongso, the supreme commander of the Sand Capital. Once this instance was released now, John would definitely face great pressure. Then there's only one other one, Ying Luo. P.S. Monthly votes are going to fall out of the top 100. Chapter 413 Greetings to the Wolf Cavalry. Link looked at the other dungeon crystal Moro's Tower. Instance dungeon name, Moro's Building. Suggested level, level 40 level 50. Dungeon mode, 40-man large-scale team dungeon. Plot summary, after you and the King of Assassins, John, complete the mission, you will return to the Moro's Tower to report. After submitting the mission, your identity as an Avenger will be exposed. Next, in the Moro's Tower, you will encounter the most complicated combat environment and the most capable generals of Moros. Instance dungeon objective, kill Moros. After reading the crystal's introduction, Link realized that he could release both the plot outline and the goal. Because of the introduction that Link could see now, once the dungeon crystal was used, the players would also be able to see the parameters and goals after entering the dungeon. The only information that could be seen without entering was the name of the dungeon. Imagine a dungeon suddenly appearing in Shenmue City, and the name of the dungeon was the Fall of the King of Sand. Think about it, wasn't there the feeling of 300 tales of silver being exposed here? Therefore, the Moro's Tower dungeon was more reliable. At least everyone knew that Link killed Moros, so it was not surprising that the dungeon crystal appeared, right? As for the fall of the King of Sand City dungeon, Link would have to wait until the Sand City was completely stabilized before he considered using it. Link planned to release the instance dungeon crystal of Moro's Tower in Shenmue City. As for the location, Link chose the southeast region of the city. When he was building the city, Link had set aside an empty space in the southeast for all sorts of dungeon crystals. It could finally be put to good use. Although he didn't know how the dungeon was made up of experience points, Link clearly remembered that killing Moros gave him 135000 experience points. Together with the other miscellaneous things in the dungeon, he would get a considerable amount of experience points. As long as he followed the flow of the previous mission and got an excellent rating, he could easily get the triple reward and make up for the experience hole. It just so happened that the Wolf Riders had returned to the Logistics Support Center in Shenmue City, so Link went over to express his concern. Without further ado, he left. "Ole Gold, I'm going to visit the Wolf Cavalry in Shenmue City. I have an important task for you." When the macaw heard that there was a mission, it immediately appeared in front of Link like a gust of wind, its eyes sparkling. "Place this crystal on the shelf in the first cave in the open space on the southeast side of the Azure Wood City. After that, find something to break it. Don't let any inhumans see your figure, it will cause a lot of trouble." Link's expression was serious and his tone was low. The macaw received the green instance dungeon crystal with its wings and held it tightly in its arms. Its brows were furrowed as if it was about to die in a generous manner in the next second. "Leave the mission to me," she nodded seriously. "Macaw, your mission will be accomplished." Link smiled and patted the macaw's shoulder. "I've always been at ease when you're handling things." Link left Howl Castle in his car, and the macaw also disappeared. All that could be seen was a trail of dust in the desert. After leaving the Howling Castle, the small road connected with the asphalt road. All the buses and cargo trucks slowed down subconsciously when they saw the license plate of the black car, LK0001. This car passed by first. Link used to be the new king of the Shitu, but now he was the supreme leader of the Shitu in both name and reality. Who would dare to overtake the leader's car? However, just as they were about to enter the city, the black car turned into a small road and followed the road outside the city to the Druid district. The players on the bus were leaning against the window. There were at least a dozen faces on the 1 square meter window, and each face was pressed against the glass, twisted beyond recognition. Link has actually come to Godwood City. Did something big happen again? Why isn't he entering the city? Where is he going? Looking at the direction of this road, it seems to be going outside the Druid district. It should be to the one-stop logistics service center, right? Then they must have gone to see the Wolf Cavalry. I heard that the Wolf Cavalry took the initiative to attack in the morning. They fought with the Machinery Faith and the Wasteland Gang in the desert and returned with a great victory. That's right, my friend received a mission from the Military Intelligence Department this morning to clean up the battlefield at the front line. They said that the reward was quite generous. After I finished the instance dungeon, I rushed over here. Haven't you heard your friend say anything? There really is such a thing. It was said that the Desert Coalition had suffered heavy losses, but he saw 20 to 30 destroyed armed jeeps. He had collected more than 30 corpses. However, I've heard that we also suffered some losses. Over 10 huge wolves were injured, and about 4 or 5 were killed. It seems that this giant wolf of the wilderness is not omnipotent. It still has to stop after encountering enough artillery fire. Just as the players on the glass were discussing, the black car had disappeared from the road, and the bus had officially stopped at the entrance of Shenmue City. A mechanical announcement was heard. "Hello, we have arrived at Shenmue City, the final destination of this bus. All passengers, please take your belongings and get off the bus in an orderly manner. Don't get crowded." The players got off the bus like a swarm of bees and immediately became one with the crowd entering the city like frightened little spiders. After Link reached the top of the Sand Capital and caught the Inhumans off guard, he became the commander of the Sand Capital. The status of the city in the players' hearts rose even higher. The similar mission office set up by the 4 military departments in the city was closed down in less than a month. The players who had buried their heads in quests all felt lonely. The reputation points that could not be transferred and converted, as well as many players who had met the requirements but had not had the time to exchange for it, had been busy for a month. In the end, the grand prize was like a carrot hanging in front of a donkey's head, and no one had eaten it. There were even some who madly completed missions to reach the target, but before they could exchange for anything, the mission offices of the 4 departments were closed. It was just like the P2P Thunderstorm company that scammed money and ran away in real life, leaving only chicken feathers and players who had not reacted yet. After the missions from the Military Intelligence Division stopped, some other players also moved to the 4 division missions for a while. However, they did not put all their energy into it. In the end, the players who had detested Link became the laughingstock of the other players. Shenmue City had also become the only place in the entire Sandu that had a large-scale quest distribution center. With Link's design, the city had become a place for players to level up from level 1 to 10. After reaching level 10, the Military Intelligence Department of Shenmue City had become a good place to level up and do quests. As the average level of the players reached level 14, most of them would be gathered in Shenmue City. At that time, the purpose and effectiveness of the city's planning would be revealed. The various functional areas were not lacking, allowing the players' ideas to be realized. The highly concentrated planning saved them the trouble of running from the south to the north of the city. Link's black car slowly stopped at the entrance of the logistics service center. The druid who worked there jogged to the car to greet them after seeing the license plate. The driver carefully opened the back door and pressed his hand against the door frame. The green-eyed druid standing next to the car put his hands in front of his body and swayed back and forth. His eyes were in a daze, both nervous and expectant. "Hello, Elder Lin." After alighting from the carriage, Link sized up the reserved druid apprentice and nodded. "Are the wolf riders all here?" The druid apprentice followed closely behind Link, not daring to walk too fast or too far behind. "They're all in the service center. Most of them are being fed in the resting hall, while a small portion of them are being treated in the recuperation hall." Link walked into the logistics center. The druid staff inside were all nervous, expectant, and reserved when they saw Link. They all stopped what they were doing and stood up to welcome him. As he walked, Link gestured for them to continue working. The eyes of all the staff in the service center were filled with admiration. These young druids had all come to the druid district of Shenmue City to complete their training missions. They had then been assigned to the service center to come into contact with the wasteland wolves and complete their trials. And among the younger generation of druids, the most popular and most admired person had changed from the third elder to the current elder Linklin. Especially since Link had become the supreme leader of the Sand City. To these Moon Shadow Council druids, the entire Sand City belonged to them, and they were even more attached to this strange land. Link had just stepped into the resting hall when the soldiers who were resting and feeding the wolves suddenly stood up. The captain ordered, "All rise." The next second, all the soldiers took off their hats and saluted. "Good day, General." Many of the soldiers shouted too loudly, and their faces turned red and the veins on their foreheads popped. Under the command of Commander Wimbledon, the Shitu military had suffered 2 major losses. These 2 battles had completely destroyed the morale of the Shitu soldiers. However, after Link took over, he picked out the soldiers who were good at riding and gave each of them a giant wolf. Before the battle, they seized the time to establish a tacit understanding with the giant wolves of the wilderness. They were amazed by this kind of unusually obedient and even somewhat telepathic giant beast. However, they had also seriously thought about it. No matter how fierce the wasteland wolf was, it was still made of flesh and blood. Could it really have the upper hand in the face of the light machine gun's firepower and the 4 members of the cult in the seat? However, when they slaughtered their enemies on the battlefield and the giant wolves showed their terrifying speed and dominance, all their doubts disappeared. All that was left was the resentment and pressure that had been suppressed for a long time, which was released to the enemy. This was the first time the main forces of Shandu had won against the coalition army of the extremists in the desert, and the feeling of exaltation was extremely satisfying. They came from the army, the Fox Special Forces, and the Special Forces. However, after this battle, their loyalty was with Link. 60% of the credit for today's battle goes to the giant wolves, 30% to your combat skills, and 10% to your fearlessness. You're really brave to charge when you're several times less than your enemy. Link's words were very provocative. Just a few words were enough to make the soldiers tremble and hold back tears. Treat your comrades who fought alongside you well. Without them, there wouldn't be the first victory on the battlefield in Shandu. They can't enjoy the glory given by the people of Shandu, so you have to give the glory to these partners. Link then gestured for everyone to sit down and continue feeding. Link's words were simple to translate. I'll give you my pet. You'd better serve me well. After leaving the resting area, Link went to the recovery area. Be it the temperature or the light, it was a little dimmer here than the rest area in front. Most of the treatment chambers were empty, with only a dozen or so that glowed with red light working. The soldiers stood in front of their respective treatment chambers and watched anxiously. In the recovery chamber with red lights, there were densely packed small snails crawling on the wounds of the huge wild wolf. These little snails were the blood slugs that Link had synthesized and bred before. They had never been put to much use. The main reason was that the production was not enough. The blood slug's reproduction speed was much slower than other creatures. After several months, it had finally formed a scale and was beginning to increase exponentially. As the quantity increased, the food requirements also became more stringent. The amount of blood that could be extracted from food alone was not impressive. Later on, Link tried feeding the blood slug with a piglet, and the results were satisfactory. This was the reason for the current large-scale application. When the soldiers saw Link, they all wanted to stand up and shout, but Link quickly stopped them. He motioned for them not to disturb the injured wolves and to let them rest. The soldiers looked ashamed. There were very few injuries and deaths in this battle, but the others' giant wolves were intact, and only their giant wolves were injured. This made them very upset, and they wished they could take their place. Link consoled and encouraged her, then asked, "Where are the dead huge wolves?" "It's right behind us. A few elite druids are guiding the soul of the giant wasteland wolf," the soldiers quickly replied. Link continued walking. Behind the logistics center was a small field built by the druids. It was designed so that the giant wolves who had finished their recovery could undergo recovery training here and complete the final inspection. At this moment, under the shadow of a swaying tree, a few elite druids were using a ritual to extract the soul of a giant wasteland wolf. By using the power of nature of the divine tree Noxie, he could make these giant wolves' physical bodies calm down, and their souls transcend, finally returning to the embrace of the divine tree. The knights of the 5 giant wolves knelt at the side, lowering their heads and sobbing slightly. Tears rolled down their cheeks and fell on the grass. The soul of the giant wasteland wolf, which had already undergone the ritual, ran over excitedly when it saw Link. It lay in front of Link and rubbed its big head against Link's leg. It didn't seem uncomfortable at all. Link knelt down and touched the translucent blue soul of the giant wolf. The hive's power didn't just affect the bloodline, it also affected the soul. Even after saying goodbye to its body, the giant wasteland wolf still remained loyal and affectionate to Link. This showed how powerful the bugs were. The soul of the giant wolf could not leave the protection of the divine tree Noxie. Once it left, it would turn into ashes. Perhaps, he could use synthesis to remove the flaws in their souls. Before that, he should go to the divine tree Noxie and ask for advice from the living dictionary of druids, the ancient tree of knowledge. P.S. Begging for monthly votes and recommendation votes. Chapter 414 Energy Revolution. The druid elites who were in the middle of the ritual saw Link. They wanted to stand up and greet him at first, but were suppressed by Link's words. The soul ritual is important. With just a few words, the young druids calmed down and devoted themselves to the ritual. The 5 soldiers were all injured to different degrees, and their eyes were slightly red. They helped each other up, and their faces were full of guilt. 300 wolf riders had marched into the desert, but only 5 of them had sacrificed their giant wolves. It was obvious that they were not strong enough, and they had also caused the death of their companions. Her anger at her own incompetence and self-blame for her comrades' sacrifice intertwined with complex emotions. They exploded the moment she saw Link. "General, I'm sorry, we didn't take good care of our companions, please punish us." "All right, I'll punish you to kill at least 20 enemies each the next time you go to battle. If you can't do it, you'll have to go back to Shandu and raise pigs." Link waved his hand and assigned a task to the 5 of them. The throats of the 5 soldiers wriggled up and down, and a sour feeling constantly attacked their mouths and nostrils from their lungs, stimulating their tear glands. In the end, after a difficult resistance, the 5 soldiers failed at the last step. The dam that stored the tears collapsed, and the tears could no longer be held back and flowed down. Tears and snot were mixed together, accompanied by a salute and a tearful oath. "I'm determined to complete the mission." Link glanced at them and waved his hand at the druid elites, signaling for them to continue with the ritual. He then left the garden. The inspection of the one-stop logistics support center was completed, and the state of the giant wolves was extremely stable. Link had a very high opinion of this battle. 300 wolf cavalry soldiers had killed an enemy that was several times more powerful than their own. Most importantly, they had sent out a signal that they had the strength to fight in Chitu. The Desert Coalition army definitely wanted to end the battle easily. After all, it was already late November, and the temperature of the desert at night was very low. It would soon be the coldest time of the year, which was also the time when the Desert Coalition army consumed the most resources and energy. As long as Link locked the city gates, the Desert Alliance army would suffer a heavy blow in both morale and resources the next spring. However, he believed that the Desert Alliance army, which had the pioneers of machinery, would definitely not sit still and wait for death. According to Link's calculations, they would organize a large-scale attack before winter officially arrived. If they could successfully defend, then after winter, the Desert Alliance army would collapse without even attacking. However, if it couldn't be defended against, there was no possibility of it not being defended against. When the two armies faced each other, the 100,000 wolf riders of the wilderness in Shandu, the summoning ability of the tentacles dragon, and a team of explosives would be arranged to sneak into the cave. The mechanical pioneers would definitely be in a difficult position and would not dare to attack with all their might. As Link thought about this, he had already walked out of the logistics support center. "I have some personal matters to attend to now. You can wait here and don't run around." After giving his instructions, Link disappeared into a blind spot. He then disguised himself with a human skin mask and quietly headed southeast of the city. When they arrived at the open space southeast of the Divine Wood City, there was a green vortex screen in front of the first wall. The macaw is quite efficient. Link walked up to the green screen and a system notification appeared. "You have discovered the 40-man large-scale team dungeon Moro's Tower. Do you wish to enter?" Link entered the dungeon without hesitation and disappeared from the screen. After entering the instance dungeon, the first thing that entered his eyes were the various parameters and mission goals that had appeared in the instance dungeon crystal. Link was in the container of a large transport truck. Beside him sat John, who was resting with his eyes closed. After confirming the dungeon, Link felt the transport truck begin to move. He could clearly sense what was going on outside. What happened next was exactly the same as what Link had experienced. The truck arrived at the back door of Moro's building, and he and John took the elevator to the top floor of Moro's building. After the end of the story report, John volunteered to go to the basement to receive the 20 million reward, and then the instance dungeon officially began. Moro's, who was sitting on the boss's chair, entered the hostile state. Link was much stronger than when he killed Moros. Moros only brought a few silver army ants with him. He also knew the structure of Moros building like the back of his hand. This time, Moros did not even have the chance to escape in his car. He was killed by Link in the underground parking lot. Along the way, he saw Moro's frightened eyes and repeated "How did you know?" exclamations. He felt a sense of superiority as if he had everything under control. A powerful leader-level boss had been turned into a boss in the game by Lin Ke. This was the first time he had cleared the dungeon, and he still only received an excellent rating. He received a triple reward of 500,000 experience points. In addition, he also obtained a unified encrypted frequency signal device, purple, gigantification gene fluid, blue, X2, and self-breeding cell culture medium, blue, X2. A total of 3 materials and 5 sets of materials. It's a pity that I killed them too quickly. Next time, I should stall for more time and kill Netherworld, Star Constellation, and Mad Lion. I should be able to get more experience. After Link left the dungeon, he did some self-reflection. The main reason was that it was difficult to accurately control the boss's health after the boss had accumulated too many levels. Link looked at the dungeon file. After completing the Moro's Tower, the entire dungeon had entered a cooldown period. The next time they were allowed to enter was in 15 days. There were many types of dungeons in Fate. Single-player dungeons had a cooldown time of 10 AM every day, and could be entered every day. Party Dungeon, a 2-5-man party dungeon with a cooldown of 3 days. Team dungeons were 10 25-man dungeons with a cooldown of 10 days. Super large-scale team dungeon, 40-man team dungeon. Experience epic level game content. Cooldown, 15 days. In addition to the dungeons that were divided by the number of people, there were also exploration-type scene dungeons, challenge dungeons, war sandbox dungeons, and various other different content to experience. This was also one of the reasons why Destiny could survive for 6 years in his previous life. Link left the southeast empty cave and disappeared into the empty corridor. When he reappeared, he had already recovered his original appearance. The private driver opened the door and waited for Link when he saw him. When Link got closer, he blocked the car with one hand and opened the door with the other. "All right, we can go back now." Link had just sat in the back seat and closed the door when his phone suddenly rang. It was the mechanic master Dave. "Boss, the research on the tokamark device has been completed." The few numbers, with excitement and soul-stirring feelings, swept away the low-spirited mood that had been surrounded by countless failures in the past few days. Link's expression immediately relaxed, and his brows twitched in joy. "You're in the underground research center now, right? Stay there and don't move, I'll be right there." After ending the call, Link immediately ordered his private driver, "Let's go to the underground research center now." The driver was stunned and couldn't help but ask, "The underground research center is still under construction, isn't it?" Link looked out the window and said meaningfully, "It wasn't built in the past, but Ying Ying has done it now." The driver scratched his head in confusion. He started the car while talking to himself, "It's finished so quickly." The underground research center was located between Shenmue City and the Divine Tree Noxie. He had chosen this place because once the defensive force field was completed, it would be able to completely envelop Godwood City, the Divine Tree, and Wind Howl Castle. Now that the research on the tokamark device had been completed and the problem of a new clean energy source had been solved, the next step would be the large-scale defense force field. Soon, the black car stopped outside a raised dirt castle in the Gobi Desert. High-voltage power grids and warning lines were set up within a few hundred meters, and fox hunting special forces were in charge of security patrols. Link entered the castle under the soldiers' salutes and chants. He took the elevator down to the research center that was 50 meters underground. After passing through the winding underground corridor, a blue glow came from the corner. When Link was done, the tokamark device ring appeared in front of him. In the center was an energy core that was extremely stable. The more stable the energy was, the more stable the output power would be, and the safer it would be. Dave's hair was a mess, and he was still wearing a white lab coat unique to scientists. The blue light shone on his body, reflecting every inch of excitement and agitation on his face. Dave had been immersed in mechanical research for 10 years, and this was the first time he had created such an efficient core energy source. He had learned a lot from his trip to the city, and he felt like he had opened the door to a whole new world. Now, with the blueprint in his hand, he had successfully created a blue energy core that represented the level of the Machinery Faith Steel Council Elder. Dave instantly felt elated, as if this giant core was the affirmation of his decades of burning the midnight oil. And there was another person next to Dave, who was also dancing excitedly and mumbling, "This is great. With this energy source, the next large-scale defensive force field can be smoothly advanced. By then, our Shandu will become the first city in the Freedom Federation to possess high-efficiency energy and get rid of the shackles of fossil energy. With the tokamak energy as the core theory, it will also set off an epic revolution in the new round of weapon research and development." Link moved closer to the giant tokamak ring. The blue energy beam that was constantly released didn't give off heat. Instead, one could feel a gentle breeze, like the warmth of a spring afternoon. "I've finally succeeded. Thank you for your hard work." Link couldn't help but ask. Dave and Dr. Ludwig woke up from their dream. "Boss, we didn't let you down. We have successfully overcome the tokamak device's difficulty." Dave clenched his fists and said excitedly. Previously, after getting the tokamak device and the blueprint of the large defense force field, Dave met with Dr. Ludovic from the laboratory in the 1st District of Shandu under Link's recommendation and set up a special research team. With the talents from the Division 1 laboratories and Dave's mechanical proficiency knowledge, both sides studied the blueprint of the tokamak together. There were indeed many difficulties in his research. The biggest difficulty was the manufacturing of the various parts in the blueprint. District 1's laboratory in Shandu was the most technologically advanced laboratory in Shandu. It had a unique advantage in the precision of parts forging. However, some parts in the blueprint required too much precision. They had tried thousands of times, but the success rate of the precision manufacturing was less than 60%. As a result, the research team gave up on the small tokamak device and turned to research on the large device. Without the trouble of minimization, the research was unusually smooth. Finally, after nearly a month, they achieved results. How long can the energy source in the middle of the device last if it's used to maintain a large defensive force field? According to the standard power described in the blueprint, if the entire Weeping Valley is included in the protection range, it will be able to last for half an hour under the full firepower of the Machinery Faith and the Wasteland Gang. Link gasped when he heard the answer. Under the full bombardment, it could last for half an hour, which was definitely an impregnable defense. But it was a pity Dave had never seen the mechanical pioneer's disintegration ray with his own eyes, otherwise he could estimate how long the large defensive force field could withstand the attack of the disintegration ray. Then how much of the tokamak energy source do we have in stock? At the mention of the energy source storage, the two people in charge looked troubled. In the end, Professor Ludovic adjusted his glasses and said, "General, the energy source is indeed our weakness. In the experiment, we found that the best combination of Kaz crystal and cobalt iron was in a 50-50 ratio, and the stability of the energy source was the highest. However, our reserves of Kaz crystals and cobalt ore are very low. The total reserves in the entire Shazhu are only enough to maintain the attack for 2 hours." At that moment, Link received a mission from the system. "You have triggered the main city mission Shandu, Energy Crisis. Mission hint: your men have successfully developed the tokamak device, but the stock of raw materials in Shandu is extremely low. You must find a way to develop the Kaz crystal and cobalt ore on a large scale and make Shandu one of the most powerful countries on Wasteland. Mission reward: 300000 experience points, a random blueprint design, and the activation of an excellent level event Energy Revolution." Kaz crystal and cobalt iron ore. Link fell silent. Kaz crystal was a type of extremely stable crystal. Its effect was to restrain violent and unstable energy. It was often used as a high-end stabilizing container. This crystal element was an external interstellar material that came to wasteland planet with meteorites or meteors. The planet itself did not produce it. There were only a few places on the wasteland that had such things, and they were all controlled by powerful forces. It just so happened that these few forces were sworn enemies with the Freedom Federation, Brotherhood and the Cross Corps. Each of them occupied a meteorite crater, which happened to contain an abundant amount of Kaz crystals. However, as a transmigrator who had been in the game for 6 years, Link still had a lot of experience in predicting things. The place with the highest cobalt ore content was not anywhere else but the vast Gale Desert in front of them. As for the Kaz crystal, other than the two extreme forces mentioned above, Link knew of a relatively close location. It was none other than the place where he had almost passed by when he had taken the Air Force's special plane to assassinate General Alonso the Quagmire of Death. P.S. I was in a very low mood yesterday, and my head was spinning from writing, so I spent some time on the follow-up plot. Today, I'm full of energy again. Panda roars for monthly votes. Chapter 415 The Genius Girl, the Mother Machine Goddess. The Quagmire of Death was basically filled with swamps and forests, and it was filled with deadly miasma. It was said that in the old era, this place used to be a lush primeval forest. There was a hidden underground military base dedicated to the study of biological viruses in the forest. However, it was attacked by a nuclear bomb on the Day of Reckoning, and all creatures within a radius of dozens of kilometers were killed. The unique terrain and radiation led to the accumulation of dead air and miasma, gradually forming a no-man's land. After that, the radiation and the leaking biological virus caused some shrubs and vines to mutate, gradually forming special biological forms such as the swamp wanderer and the sludge monster. Swamp wanderers, venomous sludge monsters, and all kinds of mutated insects were the main force of life here. Although Link had not been here in his previous life, he had read about the Death Swamp on the forum. The players of Fae and Dragon City had received a hidden quest, which required them to return to the Death Swamp and search for the biological virus reagents left behind by the underground military base at that time to fight against the Beast Tide and the invasion of the Dark Forest. In the end, the players paid an extremely painful price and finally managed to retrieve the biological virus reagent from the underground military base. After handing over the mission, they also learned about the history of the underground military base from the NPCs. The predecessors of Dragon City and Farnight were two of the superpowers of the old era. The reason why the underground military base was set up here was that this place used to be a meteorite crater, and a large number of Kaz crystals were found underground. After studying the Kaz crystal, it was discovered that it had a powerful inert ability that could isolate and prevent violent chemical reactions. Thus, it became the best material to store biological viruses, unstable explosives, and dangerous materials. It was also directly approved to build a secret military base. As for the Death Quagmire, it was 60 kilometers away from the urban area of Shandu. If the air base and airport at the border of Shandu were the starting point, it was only 40 kilometers away, which was not too far. When he had killed Alonso, Link had been thinking about when he could go to the Death Quagmire. The special miasma and virus environment had caused the ecological environment to change. With the construction of Ecosphere No. 1 in the Gobi Desert, Link would be able to find a large number of regular wild animals and synthesize them at any time. However, the mysterious creature in the Death Quagmire had a virus, and it had bred creatures that were completely different from the natural environment of Wasteland. This had never happened before in Lin Kei's pet collection. He could use this opportunity to expand his pet library. Link placed his hands behind his back and looked at the giant tokamark ring that was releasing energy. He said, "You don't have to worry about the raw materials. I'll take care of it. The next focus will be on the construction of the large-scale defense force field. We'll strive to complete it by the end of December and put it into operation." Link's affirmation was the biggest praise for the two. Dave and Dr. Ludovic were both in high spirits. Don't worry, General. The most crucial energy problem has been solved. As long as we get the full support of Wind Howl Castle, the Divine Tree of Noxie, and Shenmue City, we can guarantee that the construction and installation of the large defensive force field will be officially operational by mid-December. Dr. Ludovic said with confidence. Link could hear the hidden meaning behind Ludwig's voice. The installation of Wind Howl Castle and Godwood City would not be a problem. Because the Noxie Divine Tree was related to the Moon Shadow Council, some of the installation activities would be linked to the destruction of the Divine Tree, so it would be difficult. Don't worry, the entire installation process will be green. I will communicate with the people in charge in the 3 places to ensure that the large-scale defense force field operation will not be disturbed. With Link's words of wisdom, Dave and Ludwig both heaved a sigh of relief. All that was left was to show off. How's the construction of the data center going? Link asked about another important underground facility. This project was also jointly responsible for by Dave and Dr. Ludwig. Once completed, in addition to storing key data, the huge computing center would also become the distribution center of information and data analysis in Shandu. With the power provided by the tokamak device ring, it could ensure 24-hour operation. Together with the Military Intelligence Department and the Energy Center, they formed the 3 most important core groups under Weeping Valley. The construction of the data center is 95% completed, Dave replied. Now, only some final storage equipment and circuits are left. We're mainly waiting for the core energy. Now that the tokamak device was officially in effect, it could be officially used after the final debugging. According to the current progress, the spy mice will be able to upload the data from their bodies to the storage device in 3 days. Link nodded. Everything was going according to plan. When Dave successfully extracted the plans and data obtained from the laboratory building in the Machinery Palace, the Machinery Faith's technology leading the entire wasteland planet would become an advantage for Sandu. After asking about work, Link then asked a few more questions about life. Helen, are you used to life in Godwood City? At the mention of his granddaughter, Dave's excited expression gradually softened, and there was a little more happiness in his eyes. Thanks to the boss, she's doing very well now. Every day, there was a fragrant pig feast to nourish the body. The after effects of being in the nutrient solution all these years had been resolved, and the body was growing and developing again every day. You've grown 5 centimeters in just 1 month. That's good. Are you used to life? Link was very pleased to hear that the future mother goddess was enjoying herself. But speaking of this, Dave's expression suddenly froze, and he looked at Dr. Ludwig next to him for help. The doctor pushed up his glasses and didn't know what to say. The atmosphere between the 3 suddenly became a little awkward. What's wrong, is it hard to say? Dave scratched his head with an embarrassed expression. It's not that Ying Luo is alone in Shenmue City. She's not willing to stay with me and insists on following me, so I brought her to the research center. This is my fault. After today, I'll make sure she stays at home and never comes to the research center. Dave and Ludwig both knew that Crying Valley was a secret project, whether it was the research center or the data center. Only Dave, the first laboratory in Chitu, and Penny, the director of the Lin's financial group responsible for the allocation, knew about it. The other departments had no idea about the underground plan in Weeping Valley. Now, Dave had brought his granddaughter Helen in without permission. According to the rules, he would be punished, and the project might have a risk of leakage. Hearing Dave's explanation, Link's expression changed several times. In the end, he only said, "What does she do in the research center?" Dave looked flustered and quickly explained, "I didn't let her run around, so I built an empty room for her and gave her some materials and books to entertain herself. After that, I'll call her to go home with me every day after work." Dr. Ludovic also spoke up for Dave. "General, Dave is telling the truth. Helen never leaves the house. She usually stays in the house and only asks for some books and basic materials to play in the room. Let's go, said Link, raising a hand. We'll take a look. Dave lowered his head and sighed. Professor Ludovic also looked helpless. The two of them walked in front and led Link to a room at the end of the tunnel. This room was originally planned to be a storage room. However, there were not many employees in the research center, and they had not moved in on a large scale yet, so it had been empty. Originally, I wanted to put Helen in the room a little further in front, but Dave rejected the proposal and still put Helen in this room in the corner. Ludwig was still trying to explain Dave's innocence. Link raised his hand and interrupted him. Open the door now. Dave's back and shoulders visibly bent down, and his spirit and energy were like a deflated balloon. Opening the door slowly, Dave saw Helen, who was fiddling with the machine with her head lowered. At that time, she didn't have any reaction. She was holding a book in one hand and fiddling with the machine she had assembled with the other. Dave pretended to cough a few times to attract Helen's attention. Grandpa, Uncle Ludovic, General. Helen's eyes brightened, and she quickly put down the tools and books in her hands. The smile on her face was like the sun in spring, enough to warm up the ice. Why are you all here? Helen asked in excitement. Dave stared at Helen, his eyes full of reluctance, but he couldn't bear to let Helen, who had just escaped from Machinery City, know the cruel truth, so he quickly said, General Lin came to inspect the work today. He knew you were here, so he came to take a look. After saying that, Dave turned to look at Link with a pleading expression, hoping that Link would not announce his punishment in front of the children. Thank you for remembering me, General Lin, Helen nodded and thanked him. Thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to visit me. In addition, I would like to thank you for providing the fragrant pig feast. My body has recovered very well now. Link stared at Dave, then turned his eyes to Helen. He cast Detect. Name, Helen. Race, Human. Level, 20. Occupation, Mechanic Electrical Engineer. HP, 700/700. Energy, 600/600. Evaluation, a talented girl with electricity. Seeing Helen's leveling speed, which was as fast as a rocket, Link was shocked. Helen was only level 2 when he saved her. However, in just a short month, she was already level 20. This leveling speed completely crushed the majority of players. In Destiny, players used experience points to level up, while NPCs used something called experience points to level up. Helen spent every day reading in her room and tinkering with machinery. In a month, she had completed a feat that many players could not. It could only be said that there were accidental factors, but there were also inevitable reasons, to become the Mother Machine Goddess. I'm here to see you, and also, Link looked at Dave and said honestly, I'm here to see you. I heard Dave broke the rules by bringing you into a secret organization like the research center. Hearing the words arbitrarily substituted and breaking the rules, Helen's face turned pale and bloodless. She immediately said, It's not like that. Grandpa didn't bring me here on his own accord. I was the one who insisted on pestering Grandpa to come here. This matter isn't his fault. It has nothing to do with him. If General Lin wants to punish someone, then punish me. What happened next was a scene of the grandfather and grandson having a good relationship and fighting to take the blame. Link watched as the two of them tried to absolve each other of their crimes while taking the blame for themselves. If this continued, they might even commit suicide to apologize. Dave, you have a great-granddaughter. You're the one who brought him in, so you should be the one to receive this punishment. When Dave heard this, his entire body relaxed. He smiled and replied, No matter how you punish me, boss, I'm willing to do it. You're willing to do anything. And then I'll punish you. Teach Helen all the machinery knowledge you have, and let her join the subsequent research and development plan. Other than Link, Dave, Ludwig, and Helen were all stunned. They did not expect this to be Link's punishment. Dave's mouth was slightly open. He wanted to say something several times, but he didn't know what to say. Ludwig was also stunned, unable to understand the intention of this punishment. Helen stood rooted to the ground, staring into Link's deep, black eyes. She felt as if her secret had been discovered. "Boss, are you joking or hee-hee?" Before Dave could finish, Link pointed to the work desk in front of Helen and said, "Before you question my decision, you might as well first understand what your granddaughter has been doing here all alone every day." Dave stepped forward, opened the book, and saw the items on the table. His eyes suddenly widened, and his eyes were about to pop out. "This Bion." On the table was a tiny tokamak reaction device the size of a palm. Dave picked it up and took a look. An electromagnetic force suddenly surged out of his palm, flowing through the entire device and peeking at its structure. Helen lowered her head like a child who had done something wrong, twisted her hands together, and said timidly, "I saw Grandpa and Dr. Lu lose their appetite because of this thing and couldn't sleep at all. I saw them holding the blueprint and thinking about it all day long, so I thought I could help." Chen Chen. Dr. Ludwig confirmed that the blueprint had been in the hands of Dave and himself, and that it was in the research center and had not been taken out. The only opportunity Helen had every day was when she came in the morning and left at night. She could only see the device blueprint for a few seconds on the experimental table. "You just took a few glances and created this device yourself?" Ludwig's eyes fell. At least this tokamak device looked no different from the giant equipment they had built. Helen nodded like a chicken pecking at rice. "But because there is no reaction, I don't know if this thing I made can be activated." A moment later, Dave's mouth was slightly open, and his heartbeat suddenly accelerated. He suddenly asked, "Helen, you modified the internal reaction ring of the tokamak device? It's half a centimeter more than the blueprint standard, and the gap here is 2 millimeters more." "Oh," Helen said, "well, it's because the polishing tools I have are not precise enough, but in order to let the activated energy pass through smoothly, I modified the internal size. I tried to light it up with electromagnetic force and found that it worked. But after the reaction was added, I don't know what happened." Dave and Dr. Ludwig looked at each other, only shock remained in their eyes. Helen, a 15-year-old child, had managed to solve a problem that even they had no idea how to solve without any external interference and with zero basic knowledge. She had managed to miniaturize the tokamak device by learning and practicing from a room full of books. Dave's hands were filled with electromagnetic force as he injected energy into the device. Then, the tokamak device ring in his palm lit up and emitted a blue energy glow. P.S. The monthly votes are about to fall out of the top 100. Wanjun is in urgent need of everyone's fire support. Don't hide the monthly votes in your hands. Attack, brothers and sisters. Chapter 416 Death Quagmire. Dave's breathing became extremely rapid, and his hand holding the tokamak reactor was shaking. He raised his head and looked at his granddaughter Helen, his eyes unfamiliar and excited. The fact that the electromagnetic force could be lit up meant that energy could pass through it smoothly. And the blue energy glow was extremely soft and stable. Even a being at the level of the three-elemental mechanic master Dave could not feel any abnormal energy fluctuations with the naked eye. It was consistent from beginning to end, as calm as a mirror. When they were researching the miniaturized tokamak, the precision of the technology wasn't up to standard. The energy produced was accompanied by explosions, annihilation, and extreme flashes. In the end, they had no choice but to give up on the miniaturized device and focus on the larger one. However, after they hit a wall, a little girl in an unremarkable room in the research center used simple tools, related basic books, and her own bold ideas to solve the problem of the insufficient precision of the technology. She directly made magical changes to the tokamak device. This magic modification not only solved the problem of miniaturization of the tokamak device, but it also bypassed the problem of precision. In other words, the miniaturized tokamak reactor could be mass-produced without any additional cost. In fact, as long as the blueprint of the reactor in his hand was reverse engineered, any roadside stall could build a copy of such a high-efficiency reactor. Dave's forehead was full of sweat. He could not imagine how much of an impact his granddaughter Helen's magic change would have on Shandu. Once this thing was spread, it would affect the entire city's ecology. Right now, Shandu was still in the fossil energy stage. However, once the news of the magically modified reactor spread, any blacksmith stall on the street would be able to produce such equipment. The energy usage rate would increase rapidly, and the entire city of Battle Lake would welcome a new wave of machinery. This would not only bring about the improvement of the city, but it would also bring about new disputes and structure. Helen looked at Link curiously. Link's punishment for her grandfather had hit the nail on the head. She wanted to be with her grandfather and help him, which was why she had to build the tokamak reactor in secret. However, he had never told anyone about it, and General Lin actually knew about it. Helen thought of her grandpa's praise when he talked to her. After hesitating for a moment, she suddenly gathered her courage and asked, "General Lin, my grandfather said that you can see through a person's past and present life. Is that true? Can you take a look at mine?" Dave was a little flustered. He quickly pulled his granddaughter Helen and smiled apologetically at Link. "Boss, Helen was just joking, you don't have to pay attention to her ying-ying." John had first mentioned this when he was chatting with Dave. In addition, Link knew his secret plan from the first time he entered the underground black market. All of this meant that he might really see the future. In just 7 months, he had become the supreme commander of Shandu from a slave. It was a legend. Link's smile vanished. He looked at Helen and said, "Do you really want to know your fate?" Helen nodded with certainty. In the past, when she was taken away to be used as a battery, her grandfather had sacrificed 10 years to save her. Although her life was not in danger after escaping for a month, she had also understood the current situation on Wasteland Planet. Those without strength were lambs waiting to be slaughtered wherever they went. His grandfather was Link's subordinate now, but he would be too old to move in the future. At that time, he would once again become a refugee in the war, repeating the mistakes of 10 years ago. Therefore, Helen was eager to find a reliable power, and this power was the machinery that she hated the most. Link pondered for a moment before saying, "If I didn't intervene, your grandfather could have saved you from the city by himself. The plan he's been working on for the past 10 years has no flaws. It's perfect, and even fate can't interfere." However, Ying Luo. Hearing the first half of the sentence, Dave and Helen both smiled with relief, but the turning point of the second half made their smiles freeze and their hearts tighten. "However, when you ran away, you encountered a direct battle between the Sand City and the Floating Mech City. You were exposed to the flames of war, and your grandfather was unfortunately hit by a stray bullet while protecting you. Finally, you changed to the scavenger mech and successfully bring Dave's body back to Shandu. However, the seed of hatred towards the machinery faith sprouted in your heart. You desperately wanted to use the power to take revenge. In the end, you could only follow Dave's old path and start to study the machinery information he left behind. In this path, you displayed outstanding talent and became the new mother goddess of machinery after the Freedom Federation successfully destroyed the machinery faith." Dave wanted to speak several times, but he couldn't bring himself to say anything. However, when he remembered that the owner didn't see the objects on the table when he came in, he knew that Helen had an extraordinary talent in the field of machinery. He also wanted to punish him by asking him to accompany her more and teach her mechanical theories with all his might, as well as let her participate in the plan. From her actions, it was obvious that her boss had already seen through her fate. Hearing about her tragic fate, Helen's face turned pale, especially after her grandfather Dave brought her out of the machinery city. They had been separated for less than a day, and a wave of sadness and anger filled her heart. She didn't doubt her fate at all. After all, Link knew what she was thinking and why she was building machines here. "However, this is your fate in the past. Ever since I came to the Sand City and met him, his fate changed. Now that he's not dead and you've been rescued, everything's fine, isn't it? Link's lips curled up. He could see the desire to become stronger in Helen's eyes. Fate was like the sword of Damocles hanging high in the sky. Only those who had experienced grief would remember it even more. Dave stepped forward and patted his granddaughter's shoulder gently, comforting her. It's over. Everything is over. Helen took a deep breath and gradually walked out of her grief. After hearing about her tragic fate, her current happy life was even more precious to her. Helen looked at Link, her eyes full of desire. General Lin, can you tell me what my fate is now? Silly child, you can see through your past fate because it has changed, but everyone's future fate is like the thick fog in the Valley of Dawn. You can only see the sun through the fog by walking and climbing to the top of the mountain. Your decision will determine your future. Helen's eyes were still filled with confusion at first, but after Link explained, she knew that he understood her thoughts and encouraged her to follow her heart's determination. I understand. Thank you, General Lin. In this chaotic world, only power could protect family. Fate had said that she could use machinery to complete her revenge. Then, she could also let the machine protect her family. Professor Ludovic was also a little restless. He wanted to know his fate, but he didn't know how to start. However, Link had already seen through his hungry eyes. He patted his shoulder and said, "Don't make wild guesses. Your fate is good and your family is safe." Dr. Ludovic immediately heaved a sigh of relief, as if he had received some kind of life-changing comment. "All right, it's getting late. I should go back. I'll leave the research center to the three of you." Dave suddenly shouted, "Boss, then this mini-reactor." Link glanced back at the tiny tokamak device ring in Dave's hand, and then at Helen, who had a determined look in her eyes. This young figure was gradually merging with the domineering mother goddess of machines from his previous life. It seemed like the mother machine goddess of this life had been revived. "The two of you will be responsible for the large-scale defensive force field. Helen will be in charge of the progress of the tokamak device starting today." Helen was ecstatic. She immediately bowed and thanked Link. Dave also thanked Link profusely. Once he became the person in charge of the project, he would be considered a core talent in Shandu, and his life and safety would be greatly guaranteed. In addition, Helen's terrifying talent in machinery made him, a master of machinery, feel ashamed. With such strength and background, he would be at ease after his soul returned. Link paused and decided to give the three more pressure. He said meaningfully, "I believe that it won't be long before the effect of the large-scale defensive force field will be revealed." The three of them frowned. They could hear a hint of danger in Link's words. The boss never spoke aimlessly. Now that he had deliberately emphasized the effect of the large-scale defensive force field, this meant that the Church of 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 the Church would soon organize a large-scale attack. The three of them were shocked and immediately threw themselves into the research. At this moment, Link, the culprit, had already walked out of the underground research center. He couldn't help but sigh. As expected of the future mother machine goddess. She's only level 20, yet she's already showing such terrifying strength and talent. Link got into the car, satisfied. Now that Helen's machinery talent had been activated, he would receive the mother goddess of machines in the future. After taking control of the druid players, the mechanic players on Wasteland Planet would also be under Link's control. Link returned to Windhowl Castle by car. He then walked into his office and stared at the wall-sized map behind him. Crack! The door was pushed open and the macaw poked its head out. Link ran to his office the moment he came back. As a professional news worker and professional secretary, he smelled something unusual. "Is there something? Are you planning something big again, the macaw chuckled. Link crossed his arms and stood in front of the map. His eyes were focused on the death quagmire dozens of miles north of Shandu. I do have a plan. The macaw's eyes brightened and it immediately walked into the house and recommended itself. I feel that your plan definitely needs a witness. As your secretary, professional news worker, and the best controller of the video camera, I, macaw, deserve a place. You're right, said Link after some thought, I'll count you in. Inform Forbes to participate in tomorrow's operation and prepare 100 military gas masks. Where are we going tomorrow? The macaw asked excitedly. Link pointed at the map. There was a crater-like crater to the north of the Sand City. The inside of the crater was dyed grey-black on the map. Here, the death quagmire. The macaw's expression changed drastically. It left a goodbye and disappeared without a trace. Link ignored the clown and sat in his executive chair, deep in thought. The death quagmire's environment was extremely harsh. It was an environment filled with poisonous miasma, and all kinds of dangerous and distorted creatures lived there. With just Fu, the macaw, and his team, they were too weak to dig out the secrets of the depths of the Death Swamp and the Kate's Crystal. Link thought for a moment, then picked up his phone and dialed a number. After a toot waiting, the call was finally connected. Hello, how have you been recently? There was a moment of silence on the other end of the line. Tell me what's the matter. Don't you always call me to reminisce about the past? Link cursed in his heart as his goal was exposed. I have an operation here, and I have to go to the death quagmire. Do you have time? After hearing the words death quagmire, the other side of the phone was silent for a moment. I promised Masha that I would go shopping with her tomorrow. Oh, Ying Ying, how about a short fur cat? I'll give you the short fur cat if you accompany me to the Death Swamp tomorrow. Link knew that John was only making excuses because they hadn't reached an agreement on the price. Before John could agree, the short-haired cat in his arms suddenly straightened up and stared at the microphone with wide eyes. Meow 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 meow. She couldn't believe that she had gotten herself into trouble just because she was acting cute. John reached out and stroked the short-haired cat. He stared at the cat with grey tiger skin and said to himself, it's a price that's hard to refuse. At this moment, Masha's voice came from the bedroom. Who are you on the phone with, Link? Yes, Link wants me to go to the Death Swamp with him tomorrow. John said frankly. Masha jumped out of bed and ran to the living room in her slippers. Such a dangerous place. He said that as long as I go, this short fur cat will be ours. John continued. Masha's hesitant expression immediately fell into a dilemma. Actually, I think that if we ask Link to do something, he'll definitely be well prepared. We can go. Masha walked to John and picked up the short-furred cat that was still digesting its food. Come back early. John shrugged helplessly and said into the phone, you heard that? Yeah, see you at the Castle of Windhowl tomorrow morning. Link immediately hung up, leaving John with a long toot sound. After dealing with John, the safety of this trip was increased to 100%. Next, we will need some capable laborers, he. Speaking of tools, who else is more suitable than our dear players? Let me, Kong, know who will be able to receive this blessing. Link muttered to himself as he opened the points system of the Military Intelligence Department. The points were ranked from high to low, and a bunch of player names appeared on the computer screen. First place, Kill the Prophet. Second place, Wind Chasing Gentleness. Third place, Lang Feng. Fourth place. P.S. Monthly votes have fallen out of the top 100. Everyone, gather your firepower. Chapter 417 Mission Team, Assemble. The top 10 were all old faces. The last time they snuck into the floating mech city, the participating players had earned a lot of points, which allowed them to occupy the top 10 spots. However, among these people, 3 of them did not participate in the previous operation, but they were still among the top. The first person to really kill a prophet was an old liver king. Link had no doubt that he was in the top 10, but he didn't think that he would be able to get to the top of the leaderboard by himself. In second place was Wind Chaser's younger brother, who was also a core member of Miracle Guild, King of Dog Feed. He was ranked 8th on the leaderboard. To Link's surprise, the third place was Panamera, the team leader of Dragon Travels the World. She was in 10th place. Link scratched his head. If he remembered correctly, this guy should have been in Dragon City with Long Envious Heaven. Why did he suddenly come to Shandu and get so many points, directly entering the top 10? Link shamelessly thought, did they come especially for me? Scout the path first? Since that was the case, there was no harm in bringing him along for this operation and showing off his muscles. It would be great if he could pull the Long Enmity Heaven over. After all, the World Dragon was the largest guild in China and the strongest guild on Wasteland Planet in his previous life. If he could bring their main business to the Sand Capital, it would be beneficial to Link. It would also intensify the competition between these guilds. After some consideration, Link made a list. The first was to really investigate and kill the prophet. As a reward for the Liver King, he had to give him a place. Next was the old tool player, Wind Chaser, Floating Soft, and King of Dog Leftovers. With two of them at once, the Miracle Guild had its own prestige. The Druid player's good big brother, also known as Big Wet-Breasted Chicken, must have a name. As a player who had participated in the last operation and an experienced Special Forces soldier, he had to be arranged a place for him to go to the secret military base. The leader of the World Dragon Guild, Panamela, gave him VIP treatment, setting a long line to catch the big fish. Other than that, there was also the guild master of the Sentimental Guild, Tangju. As a famous mechanic player in his previous life, Link was prepared to focus on training him. He planned to develop him into a player who had the same status as Bombarding Chicken to Druid players. Link scanned the list. There were 7 people in total. As a tool for exploring the Death Quagmire, this configuration was really high class. He sent the list to Ren Yi, the Deputy Director of the Military Intelligence Office. He would be responsible for contacting these players. Now that he had helpers, tools, portable backpacks, and a photographer, Lin Ke began to think about the pet problem. Considering the complicated environment of the Death Swamp, Link had to bring some pets that were more suitable for the local environment. The 3 treasures of security were made up of insects, arthropods, and plants, which were more suitable for the environment of the poison miasma swamp in the Death Swamp. Silver Army Ant, Skeleton Wolf, Vajra. Bringing these pets out wasn't for them to deal damage, but more to give them a chance to train. If he lived peacefully in the Weeping Valley every day, his strength would probably be reduced when he really made a move. Link had just finished formulating the strategy when the wooden office door was blown open by a gust of wind. The macaw quickly appeared in front of Link. Death's Quagmire. I won't go. Is that okay? Said Link, shaking his head. I don't have a gas mask that suits me. According to the labor law, employees have the right to refuse work that is harmful to their health, and the boss can't unilaterally deduct their salary for any reason. Don't worry, I'll prepare a special gas mask for you and the cameraman. The macaw was instantly deflated, its stomach sank at a speed visible to the naked eye, and the swim ring stacked up from 1 layer to 2. Sigh, if my death can be filmed in a passable video, then I'll die a worthy death. However, Link didn't fall for it at all. He even added fuel to the fire. You're only losing your life, but what I'm losing is the glorious image of a documentary that fought valiantly at the front lines. Buzz. The macaw took a few deep breaths and trembled with anger. It wanted to curse, but when it thought of the psychology books it had read, it swallowed its anger. It pointed its wings at Link and prepared for a long time. Young man, you're a rat's tail juice. Fight back. The next day, Link was woken up by Sunflower's magical chicken soup for the present. Link's eyelids drooped as he muttered to himself, as expected, once something you like becomes an alarm clock, you'll get sick of it. Link was already thinking about when he should give the sunflowers a saxophone. He might as well change it to music when he woke up. After waking up, he washed up and had breakfast. Then, Link changed into his camouflage military uniform. As he reached the first floor, Link heard a few players' conversation. "Do you think there's a special mission today?" This time, it was a mission specially issued by Ren Yi. The mission didn't clearly state what the matter was, only saying to gather at Howling Castle. This was the first time the Kill Diviner had received such a mission. Before he came, the guild leader of the Myth Guild, Lost Mon, had told him many things to take note of. After he came, he saw that most of them were old acquaintances, so he asked to see if he could get some useful information from them. Zui Feng and Dog King were used to this kind of scene, so they sat on the bench in the garden to rest. "It's definitely a special mission. I just don't know what it is. However, with the previous mission as a comparison, I'm afraid the difficulty won't be too low." Wind Chasing Wolf looked at his blue quality gloves and was already thinking about the reward. Gozhung King, on the other hand, began to make full use of his advantage as a core member of the guild and began to analyze what was different about the 7 players this time. This time, there were 2 newcomers in the team. One was the true prophet Cha Shat, and the other was the leader of Traveling Dragon, Panamela. Looking for common points, everyone present today was ranked in the top 10 on the Military Intelligence Division's points list. And the similarities between Lost Mon and Ye Yeo's spirit, who had not participated in this operation, were. King Gozhung looked straight ahead, but his head was obviously turned to Zui Feng, who was at the side. He said in a low voice, "The 2 that were replaced this time were those who left in advance during the last mission." Zui Feng was shocked and looked at King Gozhung. He then looked at the crowd and it was really the case. It seems that this mission is the hidden Easter egg from last time. Although the rewards are the same, there is an extra reward for persevering to the end. Win thought of the perfect clear strategy he had accidentally learned from Link on his way back from the city. Coupled with his inevitable seat in this mission, he was even more certain of King Dogfeed's guess. "Then perform well in today's mission, there might be hidden rewards," Zui Feng replied in a low voice. On the other side, Tangju and Panamera were also conversing with each other, but they seemed to be at loggerheads with each other. "I didn't expect Long Xingtian to put down his pride and come to Shandu to do a task." Tangju mocked him in an eccentric tone. After all, when the server had just opened, the Dragon Resentment Heaven had made a name for itself on Weibo for spending millions of game coins. At that time, it was revealed that Long Enmity Heaven and Panamela were both in Dragon City. In fact, when he was doing a mission some time ago, Tangju had heard that this leader had come to Dragon City. He had relied on the various feeding methods of the guild's small team in Dragon City and had the leader submit the mission at the last stage, forcibly feeding the Panamela to the top 10 on the leaderboard. Panamela ignored Tangju's teasing and chuckled, "What, are you scared?" Tangju pretended to be calm and said, "You've already lost the initiative. It's useless even if you come to scout the way, so what if he's stronger than us? The biggest obstacle in front of you is the Miracle Guild. That's the credit of being a follower of a dragon, and it's not something that can be made up for by your later missions." "It's okay," Panamela said calmly. "The one who runs fast doesn't necessarily win. As long as Lin's financial group recruits people, it's only a matter of time before Dragon Travels the World becomes number 1. On the other hand, Lang Feng and Bomb Chicken were playing with dirt in a corner of the garden, discussing the contents of the mission and complaining about how expensive the insurance was. One was a family of retired Special Forces soldiers. Although everyone gathered to play games, they spent their own money. One of them was called the Druid Big Wet Chest, but he was also a solo player. Since he had to save the game coins for his own use, he would have to buy equipment insurance with other money. Just as the players were discussing, a dark-skinned fat man wearing something like a mountaineering traveler's uniform and carrying a backpack appeared in the garden. "Oh, all the Inhumans are here. It was Fu. Zui Feng got up and smiled, "Hello brother Fu." As for the others who were not close to him, they all called him President Fu. As the person in charge of the famous money-squandering arena in Chitu, Fu was still very popular. In the past, he had always been wearing black sunglasses, a black suit, a grey vest, and a white shirt. This image was very popular among players. Immediately after, everyone felt a gust of wind and another person appeared beside Fu. A camera rooster appeared above the macaw. There was a huge transparent round glass fish tank above its head, and its entire body was wrapped in a fluffy and sealed protective suit. It looked bloated like a large penguin, and its clothes had the smell of a spacesuit. "Why are you dressed like this?" Fu was startled by her outfit. The macaw helplessly shrugged its shoulders and squeezed out a few tears. "There's no other way. Master wants me to go to that dangerous place, so I can only give up my old bones. Maybe today will be the last time we will meet." Tisk 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 tisk. "Good fellow, I'm f***ing direct, good fellow." When Link heard the tea-flavored words from upstairs, he almost couldn't help but clap for the macaw. Ever since this guy learned to read books to recharge himself, he had learned to use gentleness to overcome strength. Xiuwen's words were not often used, but tea talk had become more common. This good fellow, if others heard this, they would think that he was really abusing it. When the players in the garden heard the macaw's words, their eyes lit up. These players were the best among the players, and they had one thing in common: they were all very detailed. He captured the key information from the macaw's words. The place they were going to today was very dangerous, and they might even lose their lives. The eyes of the seven lit up. Danger and opportunity coexisted. The more dangerous it was, the more abundant the rewards would be. The richer the reward, the greater the gap between him and the others. As an employee of the Lin Financial Group and an old acquaintance of the macaw, Wind-Chasing Wolf boldly asked, "Jin, where are we going today?" The macaw squinted its eyes and looked at these cute newbies. It was suddenly interested. "Don't you know? We're going to an extremely dangerous place today." The macaw sized up the players in front of it with disdain and clicked its tongue non-stop. "It's not that I want to say this, but with your strength, you'll only be courting death if you go. Don't even mention that place. I still shiver when I think about it." The macaw's few words were enough to whet his appetite. However, before the macaw could continue, Link came down from upstairs and appeared in front of the players. This was the first time Panamela had seen Link in person. She cast a detect spell on him as soon as they met. However, the data displayed disappointed him greatly. Other than his level and class, the other stats were all unknown. Just like the posts on the forums, he couldn't see through them at all. "Fu, give them something." At Link's command, Fu took out a military gas mask from his backpack and distributed it to everyone. When the players saw the gas mask, they frowned. Thinking of the macaw's hesitation just now, an ominous premonition shrouded everyone's head. "I'll tell you where we're going in detail on the helicopter. Fu, old Jin, you two take the other one later." As soon as Link finished speaking, two Black Falcon transport helicopters flew over from the north and landed in the garden of the castle. Link brought the players who were still in a daze onto one of the helicopters. After the plane took off, the three treasures, the skeleton wolf, and King Kong that Link had prepared in advance came out of the castle and boarded another transport helicopter. Fu then jumped in. Because the macaw was dressed in bloated clothes, it climbed up the helicopter with great difficulty and almost lost half its life. Before it could even catch its breath, the macaw suddenly heard a conversation. "Speaking of which, why is the macaw dressed like this?" John asked in confusion. Fu shrugged helplessly and took out two specially made disinfection masks from his backpack. The design was similar to the beak-shaped protective cover worn by medieval doctors, and it inexplicably carried the style of the Black Death. Boss prepared a special disinfection mask for it. "I wonder where it got this spacesuit from." The macaw looked up and tears immediately welled up in its eyes. This is simply bullying. I didn't sleep last night, and I stitched this up. As the macaw spoke, it took off its heavy spacesuit and angrily put on 2 specially made beak disinfection masks, one big and one small, on itself and the camera rooster above its head. John crossed his arms in front of his chest and asked, "Why did Link suddenly think of going to the Death Swamp?" Fu shook his head naively, and the macaw shrugged helplessly. "I don't know what's wrong with him, but he suddenly said that he's going to the Death Quagmire when he came back yesterday. He even insisted on dragging me along." On the other helicopter, Link was explaining today's mission to the players. P.S. Urgently requesting monthly votes for support. My brother, Wanjun, can't hold on any longer. She's being pressed to the ground and rubbed against it. Her face is almost like a sweet potato that has been stepped on countless times. It's so miserable. Chapter 418, A Terrifying Creature. Today's mission is extremely dangerous. You will die if you are not careful. So, I hope that when you arrive, you will not walk around or touch anything because it is novel. Link's warning made the hearts of the 7 players on his left and right jump. Their Adam's apple moved, and they couldn't stop swallowing. The Quagmire of Death is located 50 kilometers north of Shandu. Its interior is basically a swamp and forest. Because it's in the shape of a crater and suffered a nuclear strike, the creatures inside have mutated, forming an ecological environment and evolution trend that is completely different from the outside world. Our mission this time is to enter the Quagmire of Death and find the remains of the underground military base in the Quagmire. We will find a crystal material in it, Kaz crystal. This is an important material for the future new energy source of Shandu. If we can find this material in the Death Quagmire, we can solve the energy problem of Shandu and change the form of war at the same time. After you're done, I'll give each of you a piece of new energy equipment as a reward. As Link explained the mission details, the ambiguous mission on the 7 of them finally became clear. The mission name also changed from Mysterious Mission to Death Quagmire Strategic Resource. The mission experience was based on survival and contribution, and the additional reward was a piece of new energy equipment. Experience points were precious to Link now. He wasn't going to be a spendthrift. He would first draw the pie for the players. The temptation of new energy and equipment could be seen from the green eyes of the 7 players. As for experience, it was dispensable compared to equipment. Lin Ke knew exactly what the players were thinking, so he didn't tell them how much EXP he would be giving them. When the mission was completed and he got the Kaz crystal, he would be the one to decide how many he would give out. The Black Falcon transport helicopter was very fast, and it quickly flew over the sky of Shandu. The city's magnificence and prosperity had left a deep impression in their hearts. In the past, when he was running around in the city, he only felt that the Sand City was crowded and big. He had never seen the city from this angle. The 7 players leaned against the door of the transport helicopter and stretched out their necks to look down. They sighed and took screenshots crazily. After all, there weren't many opportunities to see the city from this perspective. If he didn't take a screenshot, how could it mean that he had really been here? Soon, the helicopter flew over Shandu. As they drove out of the Sand City, the bustling scene suddenly disappeared and was replaced by a desolate desert. There were sporadic clusters of buildings in towns and villages on the Gobi Desert. And the further north they went, the more desolate the scene became. There was only one road that ran through the entire Gobi Desert, leading to the flat and vast airport and Air Force base not far away. There's an airport and an Air Force base here? I didn't know. We're more than 20 kilometers away from Shandu. Who would come here for no reason? Moreover, there are all kinds of guards in the high-voltage grid at the entrance. I'm afraid we'll be arrested and interrogated if we come. As the players did not have soundproof headphones, they could only shout at each other, and it looked difficult and awkward to speak. After crossing the long Gobi Desert and forest, a huge crater emitting dark green miasma appeared in front of everyone. From above, it looked like a round bowl with some dark green, churning, and nauseating substance soaked in it. Just looking down from above made people feel a sense of resistance. The Black Falcon transport helicopter slowly descended and landed on an open space outside the edge of the death quagmire. Soon, the second Black Falcon transport helicopter behind them also slowly landed. Afu, Macaw, King Kong, Skeleton Wolf, and the three treasures security got off the helicopter one after another. Seeing the pets that had appeared on the forum, Panamela was dazzled and didn't know which one to detect first. "Everyone, we meet again." When John jumped out of the helicopter in his black agent uniform, all the players present were stunned. Wind-chasing Wolf, Lang Feng, Bomb Chicken, and Tangju, who were lucky enough to carry out the mission with John last time, were all trembling with excitement as if they had been electrocuted. It was as if he had seen his idol. He wanted to shout out in excitement, but the valve in his throat seemed to be locked, and he couldn't shout out. The excitement was suppressed in his body, causing his whole body to tremble. As for Cha Sha and Panamela, who were seeing John for the first time, their minds went blank. When the scout was thrown, no attributes could be seen. Just by looking at the orange words legendary, it made people feel an indescribable excitement. The legendary level was the strongest person you could see on the novice planet, and now he was standing in front of you. Panamela had heard that Link had a good relationship with the number one assassin on Wasteland Planet, the Painter. However, hearing it on the forum and seeing it with her own eyes were two different things. He didn't expect to see a super big shot NPC from Wasteland Planet on his first hidden mission after coming to Shandu for half a month. Panamela calculated. With Link and John's relationship, there must be more to this story. Perhaps the plan to shift the focus of his discussion with the guild leader, Heaven of Resentment, had to be put on the agenda. The Miracle Guild, the Myth Guild, the Friendship Guild, and the Northern Desert Wolf were all in the top 10 guilds. They followed Link on missions every day. They also had a convenient military intelligence department and abundant resources in Shenmue City. Unlike Dragon City, which had a large territory, the things they bought were almost as big as Hua Mulan. They bought XX in East City, XX in West City, XX in South City, and XX in North City. 80% of the time would be wasted on a mission, the last 10% would be spent on killing monsters, and the remaining 10% would be used to collect rewards. On the other hand, in Shenmue City, all the things that the mutants needed could be bought with just a few steps, saving a lot of time. They could go directly to the Military Intelligence Department after accepting the mission. After completing the mission, they could go back and hand in the mission. There were all kinds of convenient means of transportation and points to be earned. With more points, he could exchange them for materials and equipment. With such a concentrated mission method and a concentrated shopping environment, the players in Shandu would definitely do more missions and have higher levels for the same game time. After seeing the superiority of the Sand City, Panamela even exclaimed, it wasn't that the Dragon City players didn't give it their all, but the planning of Sand City was too awesome. The mission this time is very dangerous, Link explained. It's not as dangerous as the one in the floating mech city, but the monsters in the Swamp of Death come in groups and have all kinds of strange abilities. That's why I asked John to come with us. Link then said to the pilot, the creatures in the death quagmire may also attack the creatures along the way, so after we go in later, you guys drive the helicopter to a distant place and wait. When we come out, we will release a signal bomb, and you guys can come and pick us up. The two Air Force soldiers saluted and obeyed. Link looked at the crater behind him and ordered, now, everyone, put on your gas masks and get ready to enter the death quagmire. Everyone put on gas masks. Only the skeleton wolves, King Kong, and the three treasures of the security guards, who did not need to breathe in the lungs or had mutated physiological structures, did not have to worry about the harm caused by the miasma in the death quagmire. Link waved his finger, and the Black Widow, hallucinatory vines, and invisible killer bees swarmed out of the three black boxes. They scurried into the death swamp as scouts. Under Link and John's lead, the players and pets entered the quagmire of death through the crack. Under the dual effects of the meteorites and the nuclear explosion, the ground at the edge of the death quagmire was lifted up by a huge shock wave, and a towering mountain wall that was 100 meters high rose up, separating the entire death quagmire from the outside world. Under the erosion of time and the change of tectonic activities, the edge of the quagmire of death opened up some cracks, and miasma poured into the cracks, which suddenly stopped at the junction. The group entered the quagmire of death through the crack, and the visibility in front of them suddenly decreased. The air was filled with dark green fog, and with gas masks, they could only see their companions in front and behind them. Any further and they could only see a vague outline of the figure. At the same time, Link and the other players received the same notification from the system. You have entered the quagmire of death area. This place is extremely dangerous. Pay attention to safety. Discovered miasma, you are about to lose health points continuously. It has been detected that you are wearing a military-grade gas mask. The miasma is ineffective against you. Richard was still a distance away from the failure of the military-grade gas mask, 3 hours 29 minutes 59 seconds. The players saw that the gas mask still had an effective period and immediately became nervous. They all looked at Link. The effective period was 3.5 hours. Once it was over, wouldn't they be poisoned to death by the miasma? At that moment, Link suddenly said, "Don't worry, I have enough gas masks." The players who were walking together looked at each other in shock. They hadn't even said anything, but Link knew what they were thinking. This terrifying ability was truly shocking. However, the players were finally relieved when they learned that they had enough gas masks. The macaw walked behind, filming and dubbing. "Look at this place, it's dark and terrifying, filled with dark green miasma. Look at this wall, the moss on it is wriggling like insect eggs. It's so disgusting." The players were also attracted by the macaw's words and looked closer at the crack's mountain wall. The wet mountain wall was covered with a layer of dense moss. Although it was called moss, its shape looked like green eggs that were arranged in a regular pattern. They squirmed in their respective positions and secreted a transparent mucus. Gozhung King boldly reached out and touched it. The moment the gloves touched the transparent mucus, green moss suddenly sprang up and stuck to the gloves tightly. At the same time, black smoke rose from the deerskin gloves. John suddenly appeared in front of Gozhung King, took off his gloves, and threw them on the ground. With a burst of black smoke, it was completely charred. "If you don't want to die a horrible death, I suggest you don't touch anything here out of curiosity." The players were scared out of their wits, and Leftover King nodded like a little chick pecking at rice. He didn't expect that just touching the wall would have such an effect. The thrilling interlude made the players realize that the macaw's words were true. The death quagmire was indeed an extremely terrifying place. It was too terrifying that the moss on the mountain wall could directly corrode the deerskin gloves without even looking at them. It was hard to imagine what kind of monsters they would encounter after entering the quagmire of death. The crack was not long. After walking for about 300 to 400 meters, there were no more mountain walls in the way, and the view suddenly opened up. However, after this opening, only the grey mountain wall was replaced by a greyish-green miasma, and things could only be seen within a 50-meter range. Further away, it was a single color, and the outline of the distance could be vaguely seen in the miasma. There were a few large trees scattered around. Each of them had a diameter of more than 1 meter, and they drooped down from the tree like the soft branches of a banyan tree. Their surface was also covered with a layer of greyish-green like the miasma. The short bushes grew listlessly near the big trees, and they were basically single trees, no taller than 30 to 40 centimeters. The only difference was that their leaves were extremely wide, radiating in all directions, and each leaf was more than half a meter long. The ground under his feet was different from the hard stone ground in the crack. The ground in the death quagmire seemed to have shock absorption when stepped on. It was unusually soft and looked like a swamp. Every step he took on the dark grey soil left a mark on the sole of his shoe. However, after he left, the mark slowly disappeared, like cotton. Occasionally, there were weeds and roots on the ground that were half buried in the greyish-black soil, making it difficult to distinguish. There were also some dilapidated houses and sculptures, but they were all covered in grey-green moss, so he could only see the general appearance, which proved that people had lived here before. Fu, distribute the equipment. Link stood at the front, and Fu quickly ran over. He took out a spare gas mask and 2 radars from his bag. The 7 of you, split into groups of 3 or 4. The radar will record your location. If you find an entrance similar to the underground military base or you're in danger, press the radar button to send a signal. I'll rush over as soon as I see the distress signal. The 7 players looked at each other. Finally, Win stood up. I'll team up with the Cha Sha Prophet and Tangju. Lang Feng, you'll team up with Bomb Chicken, Dog Feed King, and Panamera. What do you think? Lang Feng nodded without thinking. There were both old and new members in this group, and Lang Feng was a special forces soldier in real life. He had experienced similar harsh conditions, so there would be no problem with him leading the team. Wind also took advantage of the grouping to separate himself from Gozheng King to share the risk and not put the eggs in the same box. Everyone took the spare gas masks and radar. Fu, the macaw, the skeleton wolf, and I will form a team, Link continued. John, you and King Kong will form a team. Fu gave John a gas mask and a radar. Because the death quagmire has been exposed to nuclear radiation, in addition to the crater here and the underground military base, the radio wave positioning of the radar may have some errors, the range may not exceed 50 meters. Therefore, everyone must be careful when taking action. Each radar has a number. Mine is number 1, John is number 2, Wind is number 3, and Lang Feng is number 4. No matter who finds the entrance, after calling out and seeing number 1 arrive, call out, everyone will come together. Alright, let's move out. The 4 teams spread out in different directions in a radioactive pattern. Soon, all the figures disappeared into the greyish-green miasma. Gilu. The true prophet Cha Sha followed closely behind Wind and Tangju. He looked back from time to time and said nervously, by the way, isn't the 3 of us a little too few? Wind smiled and didn't answer the question directly. Instead, he turned around and said, Tangju, have you been waiting for this opportunity? Tangju had obtained a mechanical weapon when he had obtained the mechanical city. After he returned to hand in the mission, he had obtained another piece of mechanical equipment and the green equipment that had dropped from the instance dungeon. Now, he was fully equipped with luxurious equipment. He was waiting for an opportunity to show his strength. However, before Tangju could speak, a whoosh sound was suddenly heard from behind the 3 of them. The 3 of them turned around. Other than the grey fog and miasma behind him, there was no other figure. Chapter 419 The Underground Laboratory. Did you guys feel something pass by behind you just now? Bombing Chicken's voice was trembling. Especially with the gas mask on, the field of vision was much narrower than usual. In addition, the surrounding grey fog had greatly reduced visibility. The scene in the rift also gave people a sense of gloominess and horror. Beads of sweat instantly formed on Tangju's forehead and hung on his forehead and cheeks. The muzzle of the mechanical weapon in his hand was aimed at the grey fog as if he was facing a great enemy. Zui Feng slowly retreated and ordered, the 3 of us stand back to back and guard one side. If something is coming, let's go. The 3 of them immediately leaned against each other, each holding a weapon. It was quiet in the grey fog, and only the breathing sounds of the people behind the gas masks could be heard. The 3 of them felt as if a huge rock was pressing down on their hearts. Tangju, didn't your mechanical weapon get an upgrade? Can you see the enemy? Zui Feng asked in a soft voice. Tangju looked at the green radar screen on the weapon. As the energy waves spread, all biological signals within 100 meters would be fed back. But now that the signal had disappeared, it could only show that there were 3 blinking dots in the center. There were no biological signals within 100 meters. The radar didn't pick up any signal. I clearly heard a whooshing sound behind me. The prophet squeezed his body closer to the two of them again, as if he was only relieved after feeling the warm and strong back of his companion. Wind-chasing wolf observed the surroundings. They had been frozen in place for a minute without any movement. Let's continue moving forward. Pay attention to your back when we're moving forward. It wasn't a good thing to continue the stalemate. Zui Feng and Tang Ju's attention had been on the front the whole time. It was hard to tell whether there was really something there, or if the prophet was nervous because it was his first mission and he was scared himself into hallucinating. And if they continued to struggle, the prophet would think that the 2 old men were bullying the newcomers. The deeper they went, the more obvious the traces of the quagmire became. A small hill would be formed where there were trees. The other depressions would form a shallow pool of water with a layer of light green pollen-like powder floating on the surface, evenly covering the surface of the water. Wind-chasing wolf broke a branch to test it. It was 20 to 30 centimeters deep. When he pulled out the branch, he didn't feel any difficulty in pulling it out from the soil. The branches he pulled out only had some soil stuck to them, and there was no sticky black mud like in the swamp. This pool isn't a swamp. The water is about the calf. You won't sink to the bottom even if you step in. Zui Feng stood up and replied. With wind-chasing wolf's judgment, the other 2 were relieved. But just in case, we should take a detour. Our weapons aren't waterproof. If we walk without water, the durability of our weapons will drop quickly. Tang Ju said. The 3 of them continued walking. As they went deeper, the number of trees gradually increased, and the crowns of the 2 trees connected, forming a whole. However, due to the gray fog and nuclear radiation, the leaves were naturally brown. The originally obscure field of vision was further blurred by the fact that the only source of light above them was blocked by the forest. I have a feeling that as long as we pass through this forest, we might be able to find the entrance to the underground military base. Tang Ju speculated. You guessed it, the prophet asked. Tang Ju shook his head, his expression exceptionally serious. These trees are quite old. If this place was abandoned because of a nuclear explosion, then this place is definitely not the center of the explosion. The soil was black and the leaves were yellow. This was obviously the negative effect of the soil nuclear radiation. The center of the explosion should be black scorched earth, and there shouldn't be so many trees. I think we'll know the result after walking in for a while. The prophet held the radar in his hand. The other 3 groups were already very far away on the radar. According to the distance of 500 meters per square, Link's group was the closest, which was 2 kilometers away. If we can be the first to discover the entrance to the underground military base, we will definitely get more rewards than the others. Therefore, we need to move faster and try to search more places, said Wind-chasing wolf. Who? Just as Wind-chasing wolf was talking, a black shadow suddenly flew by in front of him. Stop! Zui Feng immediately stopped. Although the light in the forest was dim and the visibility was low due to the fog, he could still see the figure hidden in the fog. Tang Ju and the prophet slammed on the brakes and crashed into the former one after another. Tang Ju was in the middle of the group of 3, with the men on his left and right. This is it. It should be this thing just now. The prophet lowered his voice and spoke as fast as a machine gun. The 3 of them had caught a glimpse of the black shadow flying through the grey fog. The mysterious creature's speed was so fast that the 3 of them couldn't even see its outline clearly. Tang Ju immediately lowered his head to check the radar on his weapon. Through the gas mask, he could see a pair of frightened eyes. My radar doesn't show anything. As long as it was a living being with a heartbeat, the radar would show it. The monster had just floated past them, but there was nothing on the radar. Could it be a ghost? Zui Feng frowned and leaned against the tree vigilantly. The other 2 also leaned against the trees and raised their guns vigilantly. The quagmire of death was extremely quiet. Except for the sound of his heart beating wildly in his chest, he could not hear any strange sounds, including the other 3 points. There was no movement at all. By the way, what is that thing? Tangju could not help but ask. Wind-chasing wolf put on his blue boxing gloves and then picked up the official Thunder God assault rifle of the Shudu army. His eyes were alert. You're asking me, how would I know? The Prophet was holding a green quality shotgun, which he had exchanged with the military intelligence department with his contribution points. But at that moment, the Prophet suddenly felt a weight on his shoulder, as if someone's arm was on him. All right, stop playing. Don't relax at this time. The Prophet grumbled in a low voice as the gas mask blocked his side view. However, after he finished speaking, the arm on his shoulder did not seem to have any intention of moving away. The Prophet could not help but raise his hand to shake it off. However, the moment he touched the thick arm, the Prophet's mind went blank. The short, hard hair that was slightly smooth and slightly tingling, as well as the limb stages unique to arthropods, and a cold touch. The Prophet immediately looked up. The next second, through the small vision of the gas mask, he saw a giant spider. It opened its jaw and a sharp, black, spiky mouth part was stabbing at the Prophet. Ah! A spider the size of a player suddenly appeared above the Prophet's head, and the Prophet was scared out of his wits. Although the young man was shocked, the combat skills that he had developed over the past month did not fall. He rolled just in time to avoid the fatal blow. In the next second, he rolled 180 degrees on the ground and fired 2 shots with the shotgun in his hands. Bang bang! The loud sound of grape shot reverberated throughout the quagmire of death. The other 2, Wind-chasing and Tangju, also immediately dodged from under the tree. The giant spider hid back in the dense canopy, but the Prophet did not stop firing. He emptied the 8 grape shot in his extended magazine. The shrapnel from the grape shot hit the treetops, breaking many leaves and rustling them down. There was no sign of the giant spider, nor was there any blood stain. Only the leaves that had been shattered by the impact and bullets fell to the ground, and the 3 of them like snow. Just as the 3 of them thought that the giant spider had been dispersed, the canopy above them began to shake violently. The canopy next to it also began to shake violently, as if a switch had been pressed. The next second, the giant spider jumped down from the tree and pounced on the Prophet who had just fired. The giant spiders from the surrounding trees also jumped down and quickly surrounded the 3 of them. I caught another one. The macaw that was hunting strange creatures in the death quagmire with Link cried out excitedly. The macaw was pointing at Fu from the side as it watched Fu put a green, semi-transparent sludge monster into the glassware and stuff it into the backpack. Suddenly, the macaw was stunned. Did you guys hear a scream? Link picked up the radar and looked at the source of the sound. He muttered, I didn't think that the miasma fog could block out sound. The radar showed that the 2 were 2 miles apart. Under the heaven's gaze, Link could see that the sound contained a lot of energy, but it was cut off by the grey fog. When he reached his ears, he could only hear bits and pieces, as soft as a mosquito. The next second, the radar showed that radar number 3 had sent a distress message. Zui Feng is in trouble, let's go. As soon as Link finished speaking, he cast haste on himself and sped towards point 3. The macaw picked up the skeleton wolf at the side and disappeared from the spot as fast as lightning. When Fu stuffed the sludge monster into his backpack and raised his head, he couldn't see anyone around. Hey! Fu tilted his head. Where did they go? Fu was puzzled. The next second, a high frequency of rubbing sounds came from the forest. Then, one wave after another came, and even the entire forest in the grey fog started to vibrate at the same high frequency. Ah Fu shuddered and looked around. He didn't know where his boss and the macaw had gone. He looked around in confusion. The soft soil on the ground had recovered and there were no traces of footprints. There was something screaming behind him again, and Ah Fu was panicking. In the next second, Fu felt a black shadow flash past his eyes, but when he looked again, he could not find any trace of it. Fu didn't have any guns on him. He had come out this time as the boss walking backpack. Furthermore, Fu's skill-strengthening backpack, body spiritualization, psychic ritual, and spirit vulture palace were not attack-type skills. He couldn't face the unknown horror of the death quagmire alone. Fu broke into a run, madly accelerating. The sound of giant spiders screeching their fangs could be heard in the forest as they pounced down from the trees. Fu bent over and covered her head with her hands, dodging the giant spider's attack. However, countless giant spiders were pouncing down from the treetops. Fu's fear, and panic had all become medicine that stimulated the secretion of adrenaline. At this moment, there was only one thought in Fu's mind: run. The faster the better, the further the better. The giant spider missed repeatedly, and there were even some who had missed too early and were stepped on by Fu, with the help from the other side. If Fu could see what was happening behind him, he would definitely be so scared that he would have goosebumps. There were at least 1,000 giant radioactive spiders in the forest. They were pushing and shoving each other as they chased after the fatty who smelled delicious not far away. Fu ran tirelessly until the forest disappeared from his sight, and what appeared in its place was a red scorched earth. The soles of his shoes were pressed against the ground, and he could clearly feel the hardness and heat. Fu couldn't help but look back as he ran. He found that those terrifying spider monsters were all piled at the edge of the forest, not daring to take a step into the red earth. They were grinding their teeth madly at the edge of the forest, making grinding sounds. Seeing this, Fu stopped, put his hands on his waist, and panted heavily. He took out a bottle of water from his backpack, unscrewed the cap, and gulped it down. After drinking the water, he wiped his mouth with his sleeve and raised his fist at the terrifying number of spiders. Fu stretched out his index finger and looked provocatively at the tens of thousands of radioactive spiders, shouting, "Come over here. If you have the ability, then come over. I'll be waiting for you here." She stuck out her butt at the radioactive spiders and did the hula dance. It was as if he wanted to vent out all the negative emotions he had just had. The radioactive spiders standing on the red soil, after making a ruckus for a while, began to gradually retreat back into the forest in batches. Fu clapped his hands when he saw the spiders retreat. He felt as if he had ordered 1,000,000 soldiers to retreat. They couldn't go back to the forest now, so they could only continue forward. Fu looked around. There was nothing but red ground under his feet, and most importantly, the grey fog had disappeared. No, to be precise, it didn't disappear, but a layer of grey fog floated 2 or 3 meters above his head. It was like the dark clouds in the sky on a rainy day in Shandu. However, the dark clouds in front of them were too low. The distant scene could finally be seen clearly this time. The ground was uneven, and there were many pits with a diameter of 5 to 6 meters and a depth of about 1 meter. Such uneven ground formed the red land. In the distance, Fu saw a pile of scattered boulders, many of which were even higher than the grey fog. Only the lower half of the body could be vaguely seen, and the 2-meter height was completely hidden in the grey fog, forming an extremely strange picture. Just as he stood still and checked the situation around him, suddenly, an unusual whistling sound came from above the grey fog. This feeling was the same as the sound made by the black shadow that had just passed by. Pa! A palm pressed on Fu's shoulder, and a fierce force was about to lift him up into the grey fog. Fu turned his head and saw a rotten, green, and disfigured arm pressing on his shoulder. The skin and flesh were festering, the blood vessels were slimy, the muscles were shriveled and blackened, and the exposed bones were oxidized and yellow. Fu seemed to be able to smell the rotten stench through the gas mask. Fu's brain buzzed, and he immediately activated body spiritualization. The rotten arm grabbed nothing and quickly retreated back into the grey fog. Fu began to run wildly. In his spiritualism, he saw countless rotten arms reaching out from the grey fog to catch people. The spiritualized Fu crossed the pile of giant rocks, and the red earth disappeared. The scene in front of him turned dark. He appeared in a building that looked like a bunker. P.S. There's only 1 week left. Thank you for your monthly votes and support. She was now at 97th place, and there were only a few dozen votes between her and the 100th place. Wanjun had worked hard for a month, and everyone had also voted seriously for a month. They definitely didn't want to be overtaken at the last minute, so let's work hard together and make it a success. Chapter 420 Heartless. The team led by Lang Feng advanced very slowly. Taking into account that Dog Feed King and Panamela were both newcomers, Lang Feng did not covet the credit and steadily pushed forward. Let's rest for a while more. We'll advance after we've scouted the path. After taking care of a giant radioactive spider, the 4 of them were covered in the green goo from the spider's explosion. According to what Explosive Chicken had said, they were about to become one with the quagmire of death. Just as Panamela was about to scoop some water from the shallow pool to wipe off the disgusting green mucus on her body, Lang Feng quickly stopped her. The smell of the spider's slime can cover the human smell on our bodies. When we enter the forest later, the spiders will treat us as one of their own and will not attack us. If you wash away this mucus, I'm afraid we'll be eaten alive by the spiders when we go deep into the forest. Lang Feng's words sent a chill down Panamela's spine, and she immediately poured the water back. On the other side, Bombing Chicken was crouching on the ground. But this time, he wasn't playing with the soil. He was looking at it. Under the dark green soft soil, there was a small bump of soil that was constantly pushing forward. This was the magical vine that Link had given to the fried chicken as a reward. It was now used to scout the situation ahead. With the illusion vine and the beast's eye of the exploding chicken, he could explore the way ahead of time without any problems. After confirming that there was no danger on the ground, the illusionary vine broke out of the ground and climbed up the treetops like a snake. It passed through the leaves and made a rustling sound. It entered the huge connected treetops and investigated the situation on the trees. After a while, Bombarding Chicken deactivated his beast's eye state and said to the 3 people beside him, "There are only 3 giant radioactive spiders 200 meters ahead. Should we use the same method to lure them over one by one?" Lang Feng carried the military sniper rifle on his shoulder and said in a deep voice, "We already know the combat mode of the giant radioactive spiders. With the restriction of the illusionary vines, we will pull 2 of them over this time." King Gozhung and Panamela's hair stood on end when they heard this. There was something wrong with this person. He was the one who said that he was steady, and now he was also the one pulling 2 tight ropes at the same time. Among the 4 teams, the most relaxed one was definitely John and King Kong's team. The diamond's pure metal body was completely immune to the grey miasma. John's body was as fast as lightning. The giant spiders in the forest were only little guys to him. To King Kong, these giant spiders were just big toys. It stood there and let the giant spiders bite it. Their mandibles couldn't even penetrate its metal body. They couldn't even break its defense, let alone hurt it. The 2 of them strolled forward leisurely. Along the way, the ground was filled with giant spiders with their 8 legs curled up. Those who knew understood that these giant spiders were all dead, but those who didn't know would think that they were holding hairy crabs. This was also why Lang Feng's team, who was very close to them, did not encounter any giant spiders in the forest. All the big heads ran to John and King Kong's side to die. Link and the Macaw rushed to the radar's point 3 and locked onto the 3's position with the sound of gunfire. From the sound of the gunshots, the 3 of them should be fine. Link looked at the spiders that were gathering towards the source of the gunshots. He moved quickly and moved through the uneven forest without any discomfort. "All right, it's time to end this." Link whistled, and a whistle arrow formed by silver formation wall ants flew out of his sleeve. It began to kill the spiders. The originally calm ground was arched up, and countless illusionary vines crawled out from the ground, forming a tightly connected inverted net to protect the 3 people who were gathered together. "The boss of the hallucinatory vine Dao is here," Wind recognized the illusion vine at a glance and immediately stopped shooting. He ordered the other two, "Stop shooting. Don't hurt the vines." The gunfire suddenly disappeared. The illusionary vines connected in pairs to form an inverted net with a diameter of 2 meters, protecting all three of them. The giant radioactive spiders that were madly attacking from all directions were now crawling on the vines. Their huge tentacles reached into the gaps, trying to push the vines open. Some opened their sharp teeth, trying to bite off the vines. Knowing that Link had come, the three's fear was swept away. In its place was a strong desire to fight for revenge. The boss is here. It's time to counterattack. Aim the muzzle at him and kill him. Wind-chasing Wolf took the lead and changed the magazine of the Thunder God assault rifle. He then stood up and walked up with the gun in his hand. He directly and violently stuffed the muzzle into the mouth of the giant spider's jaw. 22222. After a series of concentrated shots, the giant spider's mouth part and head were all blown to pieces. The mucus and broken limbs were everywhere. The 8-legged and fat lower half of the limb staggered a few times and fell heavily to the ground. After rolling for a while, the tentacles trembled and contracted together under the effect of the remaining nerves. Tangju and the prophet's eyes brightened, and they also moved forward, using their proudest weapons to launch a general attack on the giant spider, not letting Wind Chase take the lead. He was even more unwilling to lose this rare opportunity to enjoy the experience alone. With a wave of his hand, the Black Widow and the invisible killer bees appeared. Together with the Silver Army ants, sentry arrows, insects, and arthropods, the Zerg army began to put on a grand performance in the Death Swamp. The macaw was filming from all directions. Finally, it walked to Link's side and nudged his leg with its wing. "By the way, is it really a good idea to leave Fu there alone?" Link crossed his hands in front of his chest and said calmly, "There's no other way. In order to find the entrance as soon as possible, I can only do this. The quagmire of death has a diameter of tens of kilometers. According to our advancing method, we may not be able to find the entrance to the secret base by tonight. Even if we have sufficient gas masks, it'll be even darker at night, and it'll be even more inconvenient for us to move around. We'll also have to suffer from the harsh environment and the attacks of unknown creatures at any time." As Link spoke, he thought of the evaluation on AFU's data card. "Do you know what it means to get what you want?" These words were not wrong at all. "Then aren't you afraid that Fu will be in danger alone? The quagmire of death is full of danger and all kinds of strange things happen in an endless stream with Fu's brain. I'm afraid he won't be able to handle it." The macaw was worried. "You've known Fu for too long," Link chuckled. "The impression you had from the time when Link was helping her is too deep." He was no longer the naive person he had been when Link had helped him. In terms of business, he can manage the Colosseum on his own, and his strength is also incomparable to the past. The most important thing is that Ying Luo's luck seems to have become better. Even if he encounters danger, he has the ability to spiritualize to escape. The macaw scratched its waist, still unconvinced. But spiritualism only lasts for a minute. What happens after that? If he encounters any more difficulties in a minute, he'll have to use a new trump card. Link said with a smile. Hey? Fu had a new trump card? No wonder you dared to leave him alone. Link, you didn't even tell me about such important news. I was worried for a long time. The macaw vented its anger by punching Link's leg with its wings. Soon, the siege of the giant spiders in front of them came to an end. The remaining giant radioactive spiders either fled or stayed where they were to be killed by the Zerg troops. The ground was covered with the corpses of the giant spiders, as well as the mucus from the exploded abdominal cavity. Link stood far away and didn't leave anything behind. On the other hand, the three people who were protected by the illusionary vine were covered in white and green mucus. Even their black gas masks were dyed white, and their every move was covered in sticky threads. If the Lin group's chef was present, he might have thought of a new dish: plucked living people. Zui Feng, Tangju, and the Prophet were submerged in the sticky liquid, but they were all grinning. Not only were they not injured, but they had also gained a lot of experience from the battle just now. If they were in a bad state, then so be it. The illusionary vine slowly retreated and returned to the ground, leaving the disgusting mucus on the surface. It continued to explore. The Zerg army that had been attacking in groups just a moment ago disappeared into thin air with a wave of Link's hand. They disappeared into the terrifying land as if they had never appeared. Link walked around the remains and slime on the ground. He stood not far from the three and said, "All right, get up and pack up. We're going to the underground base." Before the three of them could react, the macaw exclaimed, "Fu has already found the place." In bug commander mode, Link saw Fu's position. He was about 6 or 7 kilometers away from them. It was hard to imagine that in the time it took him and the macaw to rush to the rescue, this fellow had already disappeared from his original position and ran to a place 6 to 7 kilometers away. In terms of speed, Fu wasn't much slower either. "I'm not sure if we've found the right place, but Fu has been there for more than 10 minutes. Even if it's not an underground base, it's not far away," Link said with certainty. After all, when it came to such metaphysical matters, Fu was definitely the right person to be indecisive. The three of them quickly cleaned up the mucus on their bodies and followed behind Link and the macaw. Following Link, the three of them finally felt at ease. This time, he was no longer afraid of the giant radioactive spiders that were surrounding him. "Oh right, we also met a black shadow just now. It was extremely fast and passed through the grey fog. Did you guys meet it on the way, Brother Jin?" Wind was following the macaw, trying to get some information. He had built a good relationship with the macaw when he was helping it out. "Hey? Did you guys see what it was? This is important material." The macaw had almost fallen asleep on the way. They had encountered either giant spiders or oozlings in the forest. Although these species were strange, they weren't that eye-catching. Now that he heard about the mysterious creature, as a photographer, Jin's professional sense of smell and hearing Wind's description, he immediately felt that it was not an ordinary creature. Zui Feng helplessly shook his head and said with lingering fear, "The grey fog was too thick. I couldn't see clearly at all. I can only see a faint shadow in the grey fog, and I didn't run over, but flew over." The macaw keenly grasped the details and analyzed, "The forest is filled with grey fog, and the trees are dense. Moreover, the height of each tree is not very high. You said that they flew over, so the only possibility is low-altitude gliding." "Oh, right, what's the size of the body?" Wind recalled carefully, "I saw a pair of wings and a hunched body. I'm not sure if I saw legs or feet. It felt like a human. Humans had wings and could fly." The macaw's eyes lit up and it quickly ran to Link's side. "How much longer until we get out of the forest?" Zui Feng said that he saw a person with wings flying by. He was extremely fast and had a ferocious face. He also opened his bloody mouth and could eat a small pig in one bite. Wind chasing wolf was confused. Did he really say that just now? Link was also speechless. Did the macaw ignore him and not hear the conversation behind him? Zui Feng was talking about the wings and the vague shape of a human. In the end, the macaw came up with a ferocious face and a bloody mouth, and it even ate a little pig with each bite. Did the little pig know that he was so miserable? "We'll be out of the forest after another kilometer according to the feedback from the security guards. We'll arrive at a special place soon." Link was curious as well. In Swarm Commander mode, the Black Widows and the illusionary vines all stopped together. The dense light spots all gathered in a straight line as if they were blocked by something. Only the invisible killer bees could fly freely. This reminded Link of some special terrain, such as an abyss, a lake, or something else. The macaw's ears perked up. Its attention was attracted by the special land mentioned by Link. As for the birdman mentioned by Wind, it immediately forgot about it. Soon, the group reached the edge of the forest and passed through the last wave of grey fog. Their vision suddenly became clear. The illusionary vine and the Black Widow opened up some space for everyone. Link, the macaw, and the three players all came to the edge of the forest and saw the strange scene that followed. The red land stretched as far as the eye could see, and in the distance, there were only strange rocks and rugged terrain, and no one was there. In the sky, without the cover of the dense leaves, the height was not wide. On the contrary, there was a grey fog 2 meters above their heads, covering the entire sky above the red land. It gave people a depressed feeling, as if something was constantly pressing down on them. Link knelt down and pressed the back of his hand against the bare ground. The scorching temperature passed through the skin of the back of his hand and into his body. The ground was at least 40 degrees. Then Link glanced at the 2-foot-high fog. It was too low. It was like the height of a hotel corridor and gave off a strong sense of oppression. Perhaps it was because the ground was too hot, but the rising heat current pushed the grey fog into the air. Just as Link was trying to explain the strange phenomenon, the three players standing by the side could not hold it in any longer. The Prophet and Tangju couldn't help but reach out their hands, and their arms immediately sank into the grey fog. Hee, this is fun. There's no heat above the grey fog, and it's even a little cold. As soon as the Prophet's voice fell, a rotten arm suddenly emerged from the grey fog and dragged the Prophet into it. The Prophet was pulled into the air by a powerful force, and his entire upper body was submerged in the grey fog. What followed was a ghostly wail and a wolf's howl. In the next second, Tangju was also dragged up. Zuifeng's eyes were sharp and his hands were fast. His left and right hands moved together and grabbed the legs of the Prophet and Tangju. Link frowned and jumped up. His vision broke through the grey fog, and he immediately saw a terrifying scene. Countless people were hanging upside down with their feet tied up and their arms holding on to Tangju and the Prophet. Their open mouths were rotten. Some were missing half of their faces, some only had half of their tongues left, and their eyeballs were stuck to their eye sockets by some thread-like glue, which swung back and forth with violent movements. Its body was full of wounds, with traces of decay and gnawing. There were all kinds of tragic scenes, but they all had one thing in common. Their rotten clothes and bodies had long been glued together. At a glance, one could vaguely see that they were dressed in the old era. There was another detail. The hearts of all the rotting hanged men had caved in, turning into empty holes. These people were all heartless. As usual, I'm asking for monthly votes, let's go.